Hello and welcome to the Nash Tackle Off the Hook podcast. Just to make you aware, this podcast may contain some explicit/offensive language, and if that's not your thing, you don't have to listen, but I have given you a warning. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
You don't know the half of it, but anyway. I'm skating on the thinnest ice known to man.
He said, and they put a poison in the tank that just instantly kills them. He went and we'd run out of it, so we cut their heads off with shovels.
Suddenly, bang! The whole boat exploded.
Take your sort of 8-inch long piranha and imagine that at 4, 5, maybe 6 feet.
I said, I've revived your dead fish. F off, he said. You haven't.
That was just humongous. It was... I couldn't believe what I was looking at.
I'm just battling this fish out in the pond. I know it's a black man. I'm saying I'll never be a naughty boy again.
If you catch fish and you return them to the water, then you are my brother.
Nigel Botherway, welcome to the Nash podcast, mate. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Yeah, pleasure to be here. I can't quite believe I've been invited.
Don't be silly, mate. You were always on the list. It's really good to have you here, and I massively appreciate you coming down. What have you been up to recently? You been busy fishing at all, or?
Yeah, I've been fishing. I've just come back. It sounds like I'm name dropping here, but I've just come back as Christmas and New Year in Australia, which was a great trip, but a bit disappointing on the fishing front. I've got a little Shakespeare ugly stick spinning rod that goes everywhere with me, and I've got a scope 2-pound test curve 6 foot, which go in the case perfectly, and they go everywhere with me, and they've caught some lovely fish around the world. But there weren't many fish in Australia. I was really disappointed.
That's mad. And you travelled around a fair bit.
Yeah, Melbourne, Cairns, up to the Barrier Reef, and loads of snorkelling, and hardly saw any fish. And I fished, like in Cairns, I fished on a jetty that was mobbed. It was brilliant to see. I mean, the Angling Trust would love to see it. There was mums with their daughters, there was dads with it. It was just a real family atmosphere. But the only thing missing was fish. It was really tragic, been fished out.
Really? That is sad to hear.
And snorkelling, I saw some beautiful fish snorkelling, but nothing silver that you'd want to fish for.
Reef fish, you mean? Just
yeah. I resorted to catching a couple of sharks off the beach, but they weren't very big. And in the end, I actually felt guilty because they were so easy to catch. After I caught 2, good fight, good fun. But I let them go, and I then was just throwing my bait to the sharks and watching them fighting for it. That was more fun than catching them.
Well, they black tip reef sharks or what?
Yeah, reef sharks.
Yeah. No big lemon shark or anything crazy.
Well, in fact, you talk about them. I don't know if I told you. Sounds like I'm never at home, but trust me, I am. But I think it was November or December. I was out. Yeah, November. I was out in Florida, in the Keys with Dave Plummer, and caught the biggest shark we've ever caught. 400+ pound bull shark.
Bull shark.
Yeah, bull shark. Yeah,
they're man eaters.
Oh, they are. It. And funny enough, the next day we had another bull shark that was another big, and then it went under the boat. And normally it doesn't happen, but it had gone around a crab pot under the boat. And we got the line wrapped up around the propeller. Ooh. So me being a swimmer, I'm the one who gets volunteered to go overboard to try and cut the line. And the worst thing was, if you imagine I'm at the back of the boat and the boat's facing that way, the current was coming this way, and the current was so strong that it was trying to wash me under the boat. So one hand I'm hanging onto the propeller. I'm like up to here in the water, obviously. The other hand I've got the knife trying to cut the braid off the propeller, but my legs, because it's trying to wash me under the boat, I'm like kicking my legs to stop me getting washed down. And I'm thinking those legs were a lovely attractant for a...
Yeah.
But Plum Bobs was here ready to grab me and hopefully pull me into the boat, and Mark Taylor, who I was with, was like looking down on shark alert, see if there was one coming. But
you're nuts, mate. You're basically just a big teaser. Come on.
That's what it felt like. Yeah, I just felt like I was shark bait.
But you got rid of it, cleared the propeller,
got back.
days.
Yeah, got back. And when you put a fish back there, I don't know if you fished in the Keys, but when you put a fish back, you don't hold them like we do lovingly, because you like to get your hands taken off. I had a tarp on. First morning, I hooked a tarp on, come flying out of the water, and it was like a dog taking a bone. Just as it was come out of the water, just as it's going down like that, the shark stuck its head out and went woof, about 30, 40 pound tarp on gone.
Oh, my days. That's some life bait, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
That's frightening. That is it sort of your flats fishing? Are you in quite shallow water there? Or
You're in reasonably. Where I was there, that was in the Gulf of Mexico, and that was about probably 15 foot deep.
God.
Yeah. And we caught on that trip. I've been to Florida quite a few times. and I've only ever caught one sawfish. I don't know if you've ever seen a sawfish.
Yeah, crazy looking thing.
One day we were snook fishing with light gear, virtually pike tackle, caught 4 sawfish.
Big uns?
Oh, big, like 15 foot long, 500 pound. The rostrum, as they call it, that saw.
Yeah. I
mean, when it comes out the water, it's like, it reminds me, it's a cross between the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and like Excalibur's sword. Yeah. Funny enough, where we catch them is in the mouth of a river. It's very sandy and it's not deep, but because the current's running through and it's sandy bottom, the water's quite murky. It's like, it's lovely, like where you get the sharks, and if you're out in the Atlantic, you can see down deep and you can see the fish while you're playing them. Whereas with the sawfish, you can't see them until the last minute, and that saw comes through the water. I mean, like as I say, they call it the rostrum.
Yeah,
it's 3-4 foot long.
Yeah,
unbelievable. And then you look up the other end of the boat, and there's the tail, like 15 foot away.
What they fight like?
Oh, like anything. Really hard fight. One stage we had an amazing thing, and this isn't going to happen to you very often in your fishing life. I get a take, and we're fishing for snook, mind you. You're hoping for a 10-pounder.
Yeah.
And we also chuck a shark rod out, but not most rods you're catching on your snook rod. Anyway, my rod's gone, and I'm playing this fish, and you're not sure if it's a shark or it might be a sawfish. And I've had it on for a while, and then Mark Taylor's rod has gone, and he's got a tarpon that looks about 150 pound. It's come clear. Tarpon's going that way. Mine's going that way.
What do you do?
I said to Mark, "Do you want me to bust off?"
Yeah.
And Dave Plummer has started the engine and said, "No, we'll try and land them both." So we're following the tarpon, and I'm like dragging, thinking it's probably a shark, and then it comes up sawfish, and we got them both in. We got them both to the boat. 15 foot sawfish, and Mark's had a tarpon about 150, 160 pound.
I think that's my that's definitely my bucket list is in a tarpon, mate. Like I've had a tarpon, but never those massive silver kings that you see.
I always say, I remember before I'd ever been, you meet anglers, you've probably met them, who go to Florida or somewhere like that once, and they catch a really big fish like that, and they like jack-in fishing in this country, and I never understand it. And I always say, like, it's holiday fishing, it's great fun. But I do say everyone once in their life should catch something that's like 6 foot long that will jump 6 foot out the water and do a triple somersault. It is a thrill, especially with the sun on it.
I think I had Mark Hutchinson on the podcast not too long ago, and he was off to a trip. I think it was Belize or somewhere, and he was tarpon fishing.
I'm looking at going to Belize this year, because the one fish that has eluded me on my travels, and don't get me wrong, I'm a die-in-the-wall, carp, roach, pike, but I love my holiday fishing, and I've always wanted to catch a bonefish, and where we go in Florida, you can catch them. And like the day we caught the sawfish, caught them in the morning. That evening, I'm trying to catch a bonefish. I've been happy if I'd have caught one 3 pound.
4 pounder, exactly.
I've not caught them in Florida. I've been to Tobago, not caught them. All over the Caribbean. I went to Seychelles, but there were none there where I went to say. I mean, I didn't book it was just like me and Sarah on a family holiday. It wasn't a fishing holiday, but obviously I've got a kit with me. But the island we were on, there weren't any bonefish. So Belize is where I'm thinking of going.
I've caught them in Cuba, mate. I think pound for pound, they are unbelievable.
Yeah. I think the reason I like them, I say I like them, I've not caught them, they remind me of barbel.
They are like, well camouflaged barbel.
Yeah, and of course in that shallow water, they're going to fight like anything.
They just run. But also, like the guy, I went with a real good guide, and you can't spot them when you start. You're so green.
Yeah,
he's like cast at 12 o'clock. You're like, what? There's nothing there. Yeah. And then all of a sudden your fly line will tighten, and you get keyed into them. They're amazing fish.
I've only even seen 4 bonefish, and that was when I was in Tobago, and we were wading the flats, and I was with a guide there, lovely guy called Kester. It was worth paying the money just for his company and his stories. And we're looking everywhere, no fish. And then we saw 4, and they were tailing, and I was just about to cast, and again, bull shark entered stage left, and I didn't realise then quite how dangerous, but how aggressive they were.
Yeah,
and he picked up a rock. And it was as close to us as I am to you, and he chucked this huge rock at it. And luckily it took off. I was saying to him, don't upset it, but it took off. But so did the bonefish.
I think I saw a program. They got like the highest testosterone level of any shark. They're proper good uns, mate. Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't want to mess around with one.
Funny enough, I mentioned it on the radio, and a listener sent me, I couldn't remember to quote it exactly, but like how many neutrons of power their bite is,
They go up into fresh water as well, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, in Australia they do, don't they? Yeah. Yeah, no, they are vicious.
Stick to swimming in the Thames, or in your case, in various carp fisheries, mate, which we'll come on to talk about. for me, I think, and I've said this to you before, like where I saw you primarily was sort of through Tight Lines and that whole influence. That program for me was an absolute institution. I never missed one, whether it be on a Thursday or a Friday, whenever it moved to. I always watched every episode. Keith Arthur, unbelievable. Even when Bruno Brooks was there presenting I even watched back then. It was literally an absolute fix in the calendar for me. But I think what also drew me to you was because, and we're going to talk about it in this podcast, your sort of angling is a real sort of mix in terms of you've got this sort of domestic UK scene, different species, carp fishing, etc., but also that sort of pioneering travel, multi-species abroad came in, and that was very much my thinking. Like I wanted to catch anything everywhere and do it all, and I think I drew a lot of sort of similarities, influence, and like admiration for like seeing you on your escapades all over the globe, catching loads of things, but then also coming back and still going to catch carp at your local carp fisher or whatever it was.
Yeah. It's funny because like I always say that if you're stood in the river in India trying to catch a 100-pound Masheer, you're daydreaming about getting home and fishing for barbel. And if you're on the banks of the River Kennet, fishing for a double-figure barbel, you're daydreaming about catching Masheer in India. It's funny how it works like that. But it's interesting you say that because with Tight Lines, that was how I first got on there, really, because, in fact, before Tight Lines started, there was another fishing show that Keith and I used to be on. And I'd just got back from India and had some lovely slides of some Masheer and some good pictures. And so they invited me on, I can't remember, as the exotic species guest or whatever, so you got a little bit of a niche, and wherever I went, they wanted you to talk about that. And so I suppose that was the beginning of Tight Lines, really. And then they said, they knew I like pike fishing. Will you do a film pike fishing? And I went out with the cameraman, caught a load of pike, and they liked it. And it all sort of went from there, really.
Mad. Absolutely mad. And we're going to talk about that whole sort of process, how that led into sort of Talk Sport and Fisherman's Blues and everything else. But for me, what sort of I'm interested in primarily is that mindset of sort of, it's not your typical, and this podcast definitely hasn't started in a typical fashion talking about bull sharks, bonefish and tarpon, but that sort of willingness, that sort of desire to sort of catch loads of different species, travel, to be very sort of not nomadic, but very sort of explorative, and also to be very pioneering. You've been to a lot of places, and we'll talk about some carping chapters with Kev, with Nashi, and with various other people where you've been to places pretty much the first Brits there, and you've broken ground.
I have. It's hard now. It's hard to find those places, but I did used to really enjoy that.
Where's that come from?
I don't know. It's that sense of adventure, I suppose. And it's nice to be and funny enough, it wasn't even for like fame or fortune, because like I often went places where I was the first there and didn't even tell anybody. Like, for instance, we were the first to go sturgeon fishing in the States. And it was really funny because we were at the time, bearing in mind this is over 30 years ago, we were thinking of going to Russia. And then it was right in I had a Canadian mate who caught a sturgeon, just fluked it, and he told me he'd caught it. And I thought, blimey, they're in Canada, are they? And I started looking, and this was in the probably more than 30 years ago. Guy I knew worked for British Airways, had this thing that no one had ever heard of. He had access to this thing called the internet. And he went on there and he said, you can catch them in the Columbia River in Oregon. And I did a load of research, and I found an American. I phoned him up. In those days there was, I didn't have email or anything, and I phoned him up. And I'll never forget it. He said, what do you want to catch? And I said, there's two of us. If we just caught one between us over £100, we'd be happy. And he said, tell me something more realistic than that. And I said, why is it going to be hard? He said, no, that'll be easy. Oh my God. And I remember we weighed ourselves on the baggage thing on the way out, and I was still playing rugby then. And I think I was just over £200. And I thought, I'm not going to catch one bigger than I am. And like the first one I caught was about £450.
Oh my life.
We had them up to like £550, £600. But when we got back, we didn't tell anyone where we'd been. I wouldn't have even told anyone I'd gone because I just wanted to go again. Yeah. And like Joe Taylor I went with couldn't keep his mouth shut, especially running a tackle shop. But of course, everyone thought we'd been in Russia. And so they're saying, what's the food like? And we're saying, it's not bad. And you know what the food's like in the States. We're stuffing our faces. And we're telling, we didn't actually say we'd been to Russia, but we let people think that. And it was so funny, people saying, did you need to get vaccinations? No, we didn't bother. Did you have to get a visa? You know, and there we were in Portland, Oregon, and like, you know, anyone of my age probably like cowboy films when they're a kid. You think of the Oregon Trail, and when you're in the valley, the Columbia River is a mega river, and you look up on the sort of the hilltop up there, you just expect all the sort of, I don't know if you can call them Red Indians anymore, but you know what I mean, in the cowboy films, you know, the headdresses to appear and the bows and arrows. It's such an awesome place. And the river was incredible.
Places, mate, haven't you?
Yeah.
You've also been to, I mean, Oregon's relatively safe, but you've also been to places that probably aren't.
Well, you say that, you know, I have been to places like very dodgy, like Kazakhstan and that. But, you know, Oregon, I remember when we first went to Oregon, there was, over 30 years ago, it was when drive-by shootings were all the rage. You know, and apparently in those days, you know, the gangs would say, you know, you've got to shoot the first person wearing a red shirt or whatever you see. And, you know, you're always wearing what you were wearing, you know, taking the mick out of each other. If you're going out to do so, well, you're not going to wear that shirt, are you? You know, you're going to be dead.
Go for an obscure colour.
But yeah, it is safer there than places like Kazakhstan. I remember, funny enough, I went to Costa Rica and met some Americans there. Yeah. That's full of crocodiles, dangerous currents and what have you. And these Americans, they said to us, the definition of a successful fishing trip to Costa Rica is you all come back alive.
What a lovely thought as you go off on your mission.
And there used to be a big murder. When we used to go to India, there used to be a murderer there called Veerapan, and you can Google him. Anyone watching this, you Google Veerapan. I think he killed over 100 people. He was like, some people saw him as like Robin Hood. He was basically an elephant poacher. Right. And he'd go into the jungle and kill the elephants. But, of course, all the local people, he'd give them money and they'd feed him and they'd hide him. So he was seen as a bit of a hero. And I remember once when we were there, they sent some alleged detectives into the jungle to try and catch him. Well, that was like nothing to him. He sneered at that. He killed them, cut their heads off. And the next morning in Bangalore, the police station, their heads were stuck on the railings outside the police station as if to say, like, is that the best you can do? And then,
Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Christ, Nigel.
And another time we were there and we were in the camp one lunchtime and these blokes came out the jungle and like they looked like they'd been sort of stranded on a desert island for months, and they were India's equivalent of the SAS. There was about 10 of them and they'd been looking for him. They hadn't found him. They'd come in and we fed them and water. And funny enough, we had a game of cricket with them.
Any good? Did you come out on top?
Oh, you must be joking. The way they chucked the ball down. God, dear.
SAS cricketers.
Yeah, they were seriously quick. But, you know, they were well hard, but they couldn't catch him. In the end, he got caught and killed, but he kidnapped some famous people. And there was a time when there was rumour that he was going to kidnap one of us from the camp. And we one trip when we were there, because we went maybe 10 times, one trip we were there, I'll never forget it. We had an alleged police guard. And it was so funny because, I don't know, lots of people listening have heard of the two legendary guides in India, Saban and Bowler.
Yeah.
Bowler, like, was one bloke you'd want on your side in a fight. He was
handy.
He was seriously hard, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was so funny because as Joe Taylor and I sat on this rock fishing, Bowler's next to us, we're chatting away. And this policeman is probably 25 yards behind us, sort of towards the woods. You know, if we're on the water's edge, there's a sort of jungle behind you.
Yeah.
And as darkness fell, he got closer and closer and closer till he was virtually sat on our laps. And I turned around to Bowler and I said, is he protecting us or are we protecting him? And Bowler pissed himself because he knew we were protecting him. This bloke was well out of his depth in the jungle. But yeah, he was serious.
That's serious,
Veerapan, yeah. But I think, being honest, although he killed over 100 people and kidnapped people, I think you're more in danger from, you know, snakes, scorpions, elephants, you know, that sort, and drowning and crocodiles in India than bandits. But
wow, yeah, that sounds epic, mate. Forget carp fishing. I'm joking.
But here's a carp fishing link. Yeah. The first year I went to India, we all knew raggy paste was like the bait. And
for the Masheer,
any fisherman, we're always after the ultimate bait, and we're always trying to get an edge, aren't we?
Yeah.
So what do? I go to Gary Bays, and at the time, the bait you wanted was shellfish sense appeal. Yeah. So I've got my little bottle of shellfish sense appeal, and this is it. You know, I'm going to catch all these Masheer. They're going to fall for this. Anyway, first night there, we got there. Hell of a long journey. Our flight was cancelled. Slept on the floor in the airport. One thing, funny, the flight being cancelled. I'll never forget it. We went up. We flew to Bombay, and we had to get an internal flight to Bangalore.
Okay.
Go up to the check-in desk, and this is, I can't remember now. It was January or February. oh, your flight's cancelled. And I said, well, we didn't know that. When's it cancelled? Oh, December. Oh, thanks for telling us. That's like Indian air travel in India for you. But anyway, we eventually get to the river. I can't remember exactly, but let's say it's about 4 o'clock. And like little kids, all you want to do is go fishing. So you just chuck a rod together. We all go running off down the river like little schoolboys. And now before I left, my tent, a single one-man ex-World War II, like army tent, typical like that, nothing like a bivvy or anything, and little camp bed. And then next to it, there was a little sort of wicker stool that was your bedside table, if you like. And when I was unpacking and running off the river, I thought it'd be dark, might be dark when I get back. I'll put my torch on top of that stool so I can find it when I get back. So anyway, off we go. When I came back, I go in the tent. I'd taken my boots off, so I've got barefoot. I've just got a pair of shorts on. I walk into the tent. Not sure if I told this story before. I walk into the tent. I kneel down and I pick up the torch. And I can't tell you whether I heard, saw, sensed, but I just had that feeling I wasn't alone. So I turn the torch on. There's the bed there. I'm kneeling down. I go like that. And there's this huge snake.
Oh, mate, no.
And he's coiled up and he can't go back because there's the side of the tent. And he's like this and he's hissing at me. And I didn't know whether the torch was like aggravated. So I turned the torch off.
What are you doing? You're in darkness
And
now.
my first thought was to stand on the bed and walk out the bed. But I knew it was a camp bed. And I thought, that's going to end in tears because it's probably going to topple over and I'm going to be curled up, wrapped around a snake. So all I could do in the dark was a bit like this sofa here, was I just wedged my legs against the back of the bed. Then I know I'm here, the snake's where you are, but much closer, literally could have virtually touched it. I thought, if I keep my legs wedged against the back of the bed and just shuffle along, that's the furthest I can be away from him, but he's doing this. And as I get to the end of the bed, I get the tent flap and I go out like this. And as I go out, I put the torch like that, and there he was. Now, I could exaggerate and I could say he was chasing me, but I suspect he was like mesmerised by the torch beam and was following the torch beam. And as I came out, Joe was walking past my tent, and I think I was probably in a state of shock because I just said to him, I said, you never guess what I got in my tent. And he thought I was going to say, I smuggled some Mars bars or something like that. I had a treat for him. And he said, what? And I showed it to him. He said, that's a Russell's Viper.
Oh, geez.
I mean, if here now in Essex, if that bit you, you could dial 999, you're probably still a goner. Whereas in the jungle there, you're 100% a goner. Anyway, as I came out of the tent, again, it's followed us. Now, Joe and I are now like two little giggly schoolboys with this snake like following us, and we've got the torch on it, and we're like running backwards. And Bowler, bearing in mind I'd only met him for the first time, he became a great friend. He died last year, tragic. But Bowler became like one of your best friends in the world for like 2 weeks a year. And Bowler appeared out of nowhere with a massive great stick, clumped this thing. And the first time he hit it, probably killed it. But I'll never forget, he pulled the stick back up to have another go, but like it had sort of half taken its head off, and so it was stuck to the stick. So as he pulled it up again, this snake, which is like 4 foot long, is up in the air. But anyway, he said he'd never seen a snake come in the camp before. He couldn't believe it. And he went in my tent, and this is the punchline to this story. He went in my tent. He came out with a spotless shellfish sense appeal, sniffed it, said, no good, sir. Bringing snake, sir. So I launched it. So I never found out if shellfish sense appeal was any good in the bay.
Oh, mate, imagine.
I launched it because he thought that was what made the snake go in there. Now, whether it had or not, you'll never know. But I'll never know whether shellfish sense appeal is any good in
That is some
raggy.
That's some quick thinking in that situation.
And I said something else very interesting. And I met an Indian years ago that confirmed this story. Well, I say confirmed. I didn't quite know why, but Bowler wanted to burn this snake. And I didn't want to because, like, first time there, and it was in the days of slide field. I wanted to get a picture of it, like good souvenir of your trip, And so I said, no, leave it. In the morning, I'm going to take a photo when it's light. I didn't want to take it. It's pitch black by now. And it was as if he was really scared of it. And he buried it. I thought, what's the point of burying it, And the next morning, I asked him to dig it up. And he didn't want to. And in the end, I persuaded him to. And in those days, he didn't even speak any English. Right. And so I wanted him to hold it for a photo, but he had it on a stick out like that. He was genuinely really scared of it. And then when I'd taken the pictures, he burnt it. And again, as I say, he couldn't speak English then, but years later I met an old Englishman who was sort of, part of the Raj and what have you.
Yeah.
And he told me that the Indians' belief, and I've again heard it subsequently, is that you've killed that snake, but he's seen you. and it's like he's got a photograph of you, and all his mates and relatives are going to come and get you.
Oh my God.
And by burning the snake, it was like you burn the negative. And now they don't know who you are. They haven't got that image of you, and you're safe. And that's what Bowler believed.
Yeah, so he didn't want that around, does he?
But you're more likely,
A Russell's Viper, if you're going to go up there for like a proper run, you're going to go, top of the tree. A python would have been all right, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You might have survived that.
Python, when we went, we'll have to talk about English fishing because it sounds like I'm just talking about this, but when we went to Suriname, they told you always carry a pin there, because if a python gets you in the death grip, apparently if you stick a pin in it, it'll let go.
If you stick a pin in it?
Yeah.
That's a lifesaver.
Yeah, exactly. But I could imagine, though, like being like a Boy Scout, having a pin in your lapel, and you're pinned like that, excuse the pun, and you can't get to the pin, can you? If it's James Bond, you'll probably get it with your teeth.
You've got to be in,
exactly,
mouth shot of it and start, I don't know.
And we saw pythons there, huge, 15 foot long.
I always get stuck. This is classic, proper modern, but I always get stuck in the old wormhole of Instagram. Do you know where you got like reels of crazy stuff? And it always, because I always watch them, it's like nature, always like massive crocodiles, massive snakes. And it was Suriname, and they were clearing like a desert clearing, and it had like eroded a bank, it all collapsed, and this digger's come in to pick it up, and it picks up a load of foliage, and it picks up the biggest reticulated python like I've ever, how big a digger is, and this thing's hanging out either side of it. It's just absolutely colossal, and you think if you're walking through that forest,
oh, I know.
If it wanted you,
the biggest one we saw when we were there was really sad. It had been run over,
right,
and it looked like a speed bump because it was the whole width. I mean, admittedly not a big road, but it was the whole width of the road, and it was like tail over that end, head over that end.
That's a fright.
I mean, it was probably 15, 18 foot long. It's just humongous. I mean, it's very sad to see it dead, but
unbelievable, mate.
I'm not scared of many things, but I'm not scared of snakes. I haven't got that fear of snakes and spiders. But what I don't like about a snake, there's we've been chased by elephants in India. We've had to run and jump in the river and whatever. Now, them you can run away from. If a crocodile grabs you, you can try or a shark, you can try and punch it or do something. But you're not dead. What I don't like about a snake is it could go and you're dead without even seeing it. Like one night, the only other real bad snake experience we had in India was one night. Joe and I were leaning against a rock, probably about half the size of this settee. So you sat on the ground, leaning against this rock, and we're fishing. And Joe goes, "Can you hear that?" No. And then, "Sure, I heard something." And this goes on for about half an hour. And in the end, we get up, and Bowler says, "Hearing, sir, hearing." And he rolls this rock that we're leaning against over, and there's a viper curled up underneath it. And it was obviously hissing at us, saying, "Go away, I live here." And Bowler picked it up and chucked it in the river.
Picked it up?
Yeah, alive, yeah.
Just pick it up. Yeah. No, thanks.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, mate. But we'll talk more about foreign escapades because we've got to. It's thoroughly exciting, mate. It makes me want to go away and do some fishing in some crazy locations already. But I wanted to talk domestically, carp-wise. For you, carp fishing... When did sort of, if you like, carp fishing, targeting big carp sort of come into play, and where was that? Because you spent a lot of time around sort of Twickenham-y, sort of Colne Valley area, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, my carp fishing started like a lot of younger people than me, Terry Hearn, Jason Hayward, Mickey Gray, on the Diana Pond in Bushy Park.
Oh, yeah.
And to show you how long ago it was, me and Richard Moss after school used to go over there, and we'd either float fish, or in those days you'd have about a 10-foot. Yeah, in those days you had a float rod and a ledger rod, and your ledger rod doubled up as your pike rod and your carp rod.
Yeah.
So you'd have your ledger rod with a Mitchell 300, 2 bank sticks up high, and the bank sticks you'd made in metalwork at school with the rubber you'd nicked off the Bunsen burner, and you'd have a swing tip.
Oh yeah,
and it was great because you'd have it set up, and it was a lovely feeling when you got a bite. You'd see the swing tip go out straight, stay straight, and of course your Mitchell 300 reel doing a churner with a handle bombing round. And if you caught an 8-pounder, it was probably the biggest one in the lake in those days.
Wow!
And I'll never forget it. When we were probably about 16, because we used all different baits. And we made specials. We called them specials. Before you'd heard of boilies, and we Nesquik milkshake, mate, with that. But of course, I don't know how we found out, but the first time we used sweet corn, it was carnage.
Game changer.
Oh, it certainly was. And the other two things I remember, one, floater fishing.
Yeah.
No one had thought of dog biscuits. It was all floating crust. So what you do is, you know, the Mr. Kipling cakes in the little silver foil container.
Yeah, in a little, yeah.
You'd put your bit of crust in that, free line it, let the breeze take it out to the middle, and then just flick it off. And I'd like to think,
I love that.
I'd like to say that we were environmental and didn't leave litter, but the deal was whoever caught the first one, the other one had to run round the side and get the bit of silver foil back. But I suspect, if I'm honest, I hate litter. It's one of my I'm a Victor Mildrew when it comes to litter. I go down my road picking up litter, but I'd like to think we were, you know, but we were probably getting it back because we needed it for the next go.
It's
But,
like a little bait boat, wind powered.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Eco bait boat.
Yeah. And the other one, we zig fished in a way because we used to fish, I think it was rancheros, you know, some sort of crisp, you know, we'd probably just take them to eat ourselves, but put them on. And of course, if they're on the surface, the ducks would have them. We'd just cast them out with a bomb and then just like let it free running on the bomb, let it come up to the top. And then of course the ducks would appear. So you'd wind it down about a foot. And then we found just by, you know, we'd wind it down till the ducks had gone. But of course you were getting takes. So in a way you were zig fishing. But it's great fun there. It was brilliant.
Were you still fishing at Diana when the likes of Terry Hearn and that were on there? Mickey Gray, the likes of, did you see them actually?
Yeah. Mickey Gray went to my school. I mean, obviously younger than me, behind me. But I never used to see Mickey there. I used to see Jason Hayward there.
Yeah.
He'd sharpen mine and Kevin's hooks in those days.
Yes,
Kevin used to give me some scopex squid. That was the old Kinrua's spade ends. That's going back.
He's good at sharpening a hook or two, isn't he?
He certainly is. Yeah. So he was fishing there, and Terry was sort of just coming as I was leaving. And I'll never forget Terry. You know, you could see what type of angle he's going to be, because when he came up, he was a bit of an anorak. Like, you know, you'd catch a fish and he'd say, "Oh, that's so and so. That weighs 12 pound 10." You know, he sort of already knew them all.
Oh wow!
And the other thing, I'll never forget it. He passed his driving test. And he turned up in a little Ford Fiesta and he said, "That's me, I'm off to Yateley." And that took some balls in those days, you know.
Well, he had them, didn't he?
Yeah, and I remember, like, obviously we all knew about and fished for the Royal 40. And the Royal 40, like, I think that was before he got the car. And I think, if Terry, you're watching and I got this slightly wrong, but my memory was he virtually said, "I'm going to get my dad to drop me off there and he can pick me up when I've caught it," you know.
Really?
Yeah.
I remember Richie MacDonald having that. That was mad.
That's right.
What fish?
Oh, it was. And I never fished for it because my mate Steve, who Kev knows really well, and Steve planted half the trees on Church. Okay. And Steve so wanted to catch that fish. And it's funny because it was when I went to Portland the very first time fishing for the Sturgeon. Steve was really trying hard for the Royal 40.
Was he?
And he then went on holiday and I'd swum out and I'd found a little spot and I'd cleared a spot and we'd been baiting it. And Steve had gone on holiday and he asked me if I'd bait up for him while he was away. Anyway, I went over there to bait up and it was on the spot and I could see it as clear as anything. And I had gear in the car and it was there to be caught. But I thought, you've just had a 500 pound sturgeon. You don't need to catch this fish. And secondly, I could, you know, Steve and I,
your mate, yeah, exactly.
We'd fished together since we were 5. His dad used to take us to dine when we were 5 years old. So like, I couldn't tuck him up and catch it. I couldn't have faced him come over. You imagine he comes home. "You've been baiting my spot." "Yeah, and here's the photo. You know, I caught it." So anyway, I didn't catch it. Anyway, next time he goes over there, the word on the lake is it's been caught, and he's gutted. He says, "Who's caught it?" And he said, and they all say, "Nigel."
Oh God.
And he phones me up, not accusing. He was genuinely pleased with me. But Nigel Sharp had gone over there and caught it.
Right.
And Steve was really cross with me because he said, like, you know, nothing against Nigel Sharp, but he said, "I'd rather you caught it than him. You know, you should have, you know, if you had your chance, you should have caught it." And I said, "No, I couldn't.
Could you?
I couldn't have done it. No. I couldn't have
Did
done
he
it."
ever catch it?
No, he didn't. No.
Oh, mate.
No.
Well, wasn't meant to be, was it?
No, exactly. But it was a lovely fish, wasn't it?
Oh, mate, unbelievable.
I mean, that picture of
fish.
Richie with the fin up.
Yeah. Oh, it's iconic.
Oh,
It literally is iconic.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know if I might be wrong in saying this, but I think they might be opening fishing back up again on the old Diana Pond.
Yeah.
So
I
I've
don't
heard
know.
rumours. I don't know.
I mean, I can't believe it. I've stopped going there now, but, you know, when I pulled off the Hearn when I caught the biggest one in there, and I think it was, I can't remember, it was 30 and a half or 31 and a half.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, I'm happy with that. I'm done, you know, like, there aren't any bigger ones in there.
When's that? What? Give me a rough time scale. When
Roughly, I should guess off the top of my head, 1990.
90s, yeah. Yeah,
about 1990, I should think. And I remember, funny enough, I got captured because some people would night fish. And like when we were kids, we night fished over there and we hid in the ferns. It was great fun because it's actually policed by the police. You know, it's not base, it's proper Met police. And I've like been lying on the wall. Well, one night, here's a funny one, any policeman listening. One night, what the police used to do, there's like 2 gates at either end and the Diana's in the middle.
Yeah.
And you'd see them, they'd come in that gate. And when you saw the headlights on at about midnight, you know they're locking the gate at that end. So you'd lie behind the wall so they couldn't see. There's like a drain and there's a wall, only, you know, sort of 2 foot high, but you'd lie up against the wall and you'd watch them and they'd come along, they'd go round the roundabout and the way they went round, their lights weren't going to pick you up, you were this side, and they'd go up to that gate, lock that gate, and then you're all right, you can carry on fishing, or else you'd hide in the ferns till they'd done that. But you knew the routine, and this night, there's 2 police cars come along, so we're behind the wall. Do you know what they were doing? They were just having a laugh. They were racing each other around the roundabout as if it was Brands Hatch. And they probably only went around half a dozen times, but it seemed like an hour. And of course, as they came around this side, you're frightened the headlights are going to get you. And we were like, and they were squealing the tyres. I mean, they'd have got in real trouble if they'd have been caught because we're worried about us being caught.
What a lovely time, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. But another time, the time when I pulled off the Hearn, I never used to night fish. Like, when we were kids, it's great fun. But as an adult, I never night fished it. And to be honest with you, I didn't like some of the boys who did because they'd leave all litter and what have you, which is a bit, and they'd fish the boat in lake, you know. But anyway, I wouldn't mind just pushing it a little bit till dark. And this one particular night, I'm there till dark and I had my dog Jazz with me and she starts growling. So I know someone's coming. So I quickly look around. I haven't got time to get all my rods in and do a runner. And the next thing, this copper's appeared. And I said to him, I said, I knew you were coming. The dog told me. And he said, yeah. He said, I said, how long ago did you see me? Or where were you when you saw me? And he pointed, and there's a wall that you wouldn't even normally see in daytime. And he said, yeah, have a look at these. And he had the old night vision binoculars. And I looked through them, and luckily he was all right. And he just let me go. You know, he didn't even give me a ticket or anything. But the funny thing was by now it's quite late, and they've locked all the side gates. And I've got, I had 2 dogs. I had Jazz, and I had someone else's dog with me.
Right.
So I've now got water, and the wall is probably 10 foot high in Bushy Park. So I've got 2 dogs and all we get. So I thought, right, how am I going to do this? So I left the dogs. I said, you wait. I climbed over the wall, went to the car, tipped everything, put the rods in the car, tipped everything out my rucksack, then went back over the wall, put Jazz, who I hadn't had that long, put her in the rucksack, zipped it up, got that on my back. And it was all right getting up the wall this side, but the other side, there was a bus shelter. So I climbed onto the bus shelter to make it a little bit lower, and then jumped down. But I was frightened that I was going to sort of fall and squash the dog. Then went back and got dizzy. And then when I got back in the car, you feel, you've caught a carp, you've escaped being prosecuted, you've climbed over the wall. You know, it's a lovely feeling.
That is an adventure. There's no plain days carp fishing, is it? Do you know what I mean?
It's funny. Funny when we talk about like tight lines and Fisherman's Blues, it's great because you have some, in your job, you get some invites and you go some places you wouldn't have gone otherwise, but it does put a stop. I've never been a real stroke puller, but fishing is always more fun when there's a no fishing sign, and
that element.
If you've got to climb over a fence to get there, it's always a bit better, isn't it? Whereas of course I've got to be squeaky clean now because if I got caught doing something, I'd get slaughtered.
Fair dues. I'll see what you're saying. On there, fishing wise, you said you had a good one at the end, a 30-pounder plus. How did you fishing change on there? You started obviously very formative, making specials, etc. How did sort of things progress fishing wise as you fished it more and you sort of grew on there?
I suppose the hair rig, really, that was a big game changer for nearly anyone of my era, wasn't it? And funny enough, I remember one of the first places I used the hair rig, and again, this would be probably late 80s, Wellington Country Park.
Welly.
When I don't know if there are any carp in there, we used to go there tench fishing. You could have little Richworth 10mm strawberry boilies.
Yeah.
And again, still Mitchell 300s, churners, and you could catch like 20, 30 tench in a day. It was absolutely brilliant.
Really? You didn't see any carp while you were over there?
No. And I couldn't believe it when it then turned out to what it turned out to,
Unbelievable.
I doubt if there's any tench left in there now.
I say, yeah. Oh, if there is, I bet they're good ones.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a good environment, isn't it?
Yeah. And again, you weren't allowed to in those days, but you could get yourself locked in by mistake and fish the night. I only did it a couple of times, but
Tension. Any good ones? Any good tench?
No, they were quite small, but
plenty of them.
It was good fun. I remember taking my mate's son. it's funny because my mate, he'd have been about 11, I should think. Like Kev, one of my best mates, known him since I was 13, played rugby with him for years, been around the world with him playing rugby. And Kev was not interested in fishing at all. And we're coming home from rugby one day, and he said, "Do you still go fishing?" Because at the rugby club, there's no one else fish. You don't talk about it. And I said, yeah, why's that? And he said, some kid at Sam's school's selling a fishing rod, and Sam's the mug who's bought it. And like, he's been 10 times, caught nothing. Will you take him? So I said, I'll take him on one condition. I said, I'll provide tackle and bait. Bernadette, Kev's wife, she does the food for us.
Yeah, nice.
And I said, I'm picking you up 6 o'clock Sunday morning. He said, you're having a laugh, 6 o'clock. Anyway, picked them up 6 o'clock Sunday morning, took them to Welly. And Sam's got this little rod. It's like a 4 foot long white thing. I've still got a photo of him holding it. And I don't know about you, if you take kids fishing, I always dumb down my gear, because the last thing you want them to think is they need a like £200 rod, £200 reel. Always dumb it down. So I said, right, we're using your gear. But I said, you're not allowed to fish for tench until you caught perch, because I knew there was loads of little perch in the edge and had some maggots. So he's caught about a dozen little perch, this big, and he's over the moon.
Yeah,
first fish he's ever caught.
Yeah.
Then we chuck it out. I just put a little hair rig on and a 10mm, and we're catching these tench. And Kev's catching them as well. I set up a rod for Kevin, and I was going out somewhere that night. And at the end of the day, I had to drag them away. And like, when someone's tired, they're not drunk, there's no alcohol involved, but they're tired and they're driving home and the sun's coming through the windscreen. I'll never forget, all the way home, Kev was saying to me, if you'd have told me, bear in mind, Kev's never fished in his life. If you'd have told me 6 o'clock this morning that I wouldn't want to go home at 6 o'clock tonight, I would not believe you in a million years. And the great thing is, Sam is now 40. Wow. And him and Kev still go fishing everywhere.
Oh, that's wicked.
And like Kev, actually, when Sam was about 14, I took him to Ireland. He wanted to go pike fishing. We went to Ireland. He ended up getting a job and moving there and marrying an Irish girl. And that's all through fishing. It's brilliant. And Kev and I and Sam, every year on Kev's birthday, we go carp fishing somewhere.
Do you?
Oh, yeah.
It seems like you're in touch with quite a lot of like sort of those early childhood sort of friends. And
yeah.
Still in touch with a lot of them.
Yeah, even though Kev lives up in the Lake District now, he comes down. We, Kev, I can't remember if it's Kev or Sam, called out of 30 on his birthday last summer.
Oh, wicked.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Fishing for you, and we've referenced the fact that this is sort of adventure element within everything. But for you, what would you deem yourself? You wouldn't deem yourself a carp angler. Would you say you're an all-rounder? Would you say you're a specimen hunter?
It's funny, specimen hunter. I almost say I'm a pleasure angler because I just love going fishing. But I suppose I am a specimen hunter as much as, even as a young kid, I'd always rather catch one big one than lots of little ones. I'd always want to put a landing net under it when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But as I get older, I love, it frightens me at times. I love fishing more than I ever have done.
Really? That's brilliant.
But the need to catch is far less. It's funny. I love going. Like Sean Hodges, I don't know if you know Sean Hodges, but I fish with Sean a lot. We fish together, once a week. And funny enough, Sean was a dyed-in-the-wool carp angler and a really, really good carp angler. In fact, I hate him because he's bloody good at whatever he does. Like, he'd never been barbel fishing. Took him barbel fishing. 5 minutes later, he's better than you've ever been at it, Yeah. And then took him on the river roach fishing. Like, he's like a cow with a gun with a centre pin. Next time you go, he's better than I am with a centre pin. And now Sean and I mean, we fish for perch, we fish for roach. He loves fishing for everything. And I forgot where I started with this story. How we got to Sean.
We're talking about what you deem.
Oh yeah, me, yeah. But yeah, that's what I was going to say about Sean. Is like Sean is like a really early starter, and he'll often be there before me. And sometimes he'll say, "I'm fishing." So I say, "All right, I'll come," and I'll get there, and I'll park the car, and I'll go down to where he's fishing. And an hour later, he'll say to me, "You're going to get your gear?" Oh, I might do. Just like sometimes just being there's enough. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes just love being there. And like that Terry, I still keep in touch with Terry, and we go fishing once a year.
Yeah.
And last year when I went fishing with him, we met at about 7 a.m, and we sat in the fishing hut drinking tea till about 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
We then fished till lunchtime, sat in the hut till about 3 o'clock, went back out fishing till, 5:30, back in the fishing hut till about 8:30. And we worked out we'd had something like 5 hours fishing and 8 hours drinking tea and chatting fishing. And
Yeah. Maybe but fishing is so much more than just going out there catching fish, isn't it? You know what I mean? Especially when you've done as much as you have as well.
Yeah. And I love going on my own. I really love, I don't need to be there. I love going on my own. It doesn't bother me. I had a lake record carp this year. No one there, didn't get a photo. It doesn't bother me. I love being on my own. I love being somewhere wild and windy and the only person there. But it's also nice just going with one mate, because if you go and a mate to the pub, the village nutter can come and impose on you and start, the boar will come and, Cliffy will come and start talking to you. As just you and a mate, you can put the world to rights, can't you?
Yeah, often. Very much often.
I love it.
Lake record you've just glossed over there, mate. No one around?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
I'm jammy. I caught a lake record in the Cotswolds 2 years ago as well with Sean.
That's the fish that I've seen.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
This is another lake record.
That one still hasn't been beaten either. I can't believe it.
But wasn't that on a guestie?
Oh, so funny, Hassan. I feel guilty talking about it. And if anyone in the syndicate's watching, I'm sorry. But actually, they were really nice because I thought I'd get slaughtered. I imagined, because I'm not a social media person. I should be with the radio, but I'm just not.
Yeah.
I like a private life and keep quiet and just get on and enjoy myself. But I thought I'd get slaughtered because, like, Sean takes a photo of it, sends it to the bloke who runs the syndicate. It's on their Facebook page, by the time I put it back. I got really nice, well, not me, but there was really nice feedback, all really nice messages. There was no green-eyed monster. I was really surprised. It was really nice. But, that Sean was trying to get me in the syndicate. And he phoned me up and he said, they've got a working party, but they're short of people. If you come and help the work party, you can do the night. And so I said, yeah, all right, sounds good to me. You're basically brown-nosing to get in the syndicate. But I enjoyed the work part. It nearly killed me. It was really hard work, but I enjoyed it. And before it started, I plumbed up and I thought I'd found a swim and I put my stuff in the swim. And then when the work party finished, when I actually chucked a rod out, I'd got it wrong. And there was a big weed bed between there and me. And I thought, if I hook anything there, I'm chance. So real mad rush before dark to move the other side of Sean and find a spot, put rod out. And the great thing was Sean had been catching quite well, and he'd said to me, bite times between, I can't remember now, 7 and 9 in the morning. Oh, that's nice and social. So I've got a good night's kip and cup of tea, watching the rods, looking out over the water. I saw it quite deep where it was. I can't remember now, 15, maybe even 20 foot deep, big old Cotswold gravel pit. And I saw a fish roll. I thought, that's a good sign. And a couple of minutes later, bib. And it's only a late record, 42 and a half. I had to go out in the boat. Sean wondered what I was playing about, trying to get it in the boat, but it's like trying not to tip a boat over.
Yeah, definitely.
And when I got back to shore, he took one look at it, and when we weighed it, he said, "That's it." He said, "You've got no chance of getting in the syndicate now."
Mate,
and of course, I'm not a big head, but just winding you up, I said, "Why do I want to join the syndicate now? I've just caught the biggest one in the lake."
Done it, mate.
But So
rig wise, what were you catching that on? How are you fishing?
I caught that. I hate to say it because I'm sure you use it. It's just so efficient, Ronnie. It's just devastating, isn't it? Chods sort of passed me by. I've caught a few fish on chods, but I never got in on the beginning on chods. I'm sort of quite old fashioned. I haven't changed my rig much. I sort of blow back, and I love doing things a little bit different. I love 2 20mm boilies,
double baits.
I think they're a bit different, and I think when they spit them out, I think that extra weight probably nails that hook in the bottom lip. Yeah, and again, it's just a bit different. But since I started using Ronnies, it's hard to not use them, isn't it? They're just so efficient.
I fought it, I think, for a period of time and was like, no, I was very slow getting onto it. But as you say, as soon as you use them, the fact you can change a hook as well quickly, they are efficient. They take some beating. They're not for everyone. People don't like all the metal work and the likes of, but they're effective, mate. They do the job, don't they?
I keep them as simple as possible, but they do the job, don't they? There's no getting away from it. And wherever you go, they work, don't they? Whether you're using 2 bits of plastic or a pop-up, they just work.
We were saying it today in the office. Like, if you look at like a lot of the times when you're out there fishing, they do it all. Whether you're presenting a wafter or either a pop-up, like they're mega. So, I can't knock you for that. Yeah. You said they're double baits. It's something that obviously, you might see 2 12mm or small baits, but 2 big bottom baits.
Yeah, I like 2
proper
big
baits.
Bottom baits. You
don't often see it, do you? Against the grain, isn't it?
I caught my biggest ever carp on 2 20mm key a few years back on a lake in France. I'll never forget because the bailiff was sort of showing you all the spots. And so in my head, I got all the spots. And then I sort of worked out a map of it. and put my bait the furthest away from any of those spots, because I thought, it's like French lakes. They all get fish. They all cast X wraps to X.
I can't imagine that's a bit of you, Nigel, is it?
No, not at all. Not at all, which is why I do the exact opposite. So I find the spot further away from anywhere that he says anyone fishes, and had a £60 common off it. And again on 2 20mm baits.
Blowback rig? Tubing or
tubing?
Ring? Yeah.
Sometimes I use tubing, sometimes I use a ring.
Think it matters?
Not desperately. Funny enough, I've got a picture of that rig somewhere I could check, but it would probably been tubing on that one in France. But again, France has got, I first went to France in about 1991, where it was like carnage. You couldn't keep your rods in the water. And then I went quite a lot, to Lac de Deux, the Orient, and had some brilliant adventures.
Yeah.
And then I don't know why I stopped going. I'm not sure. But then, of course, all the commercial lakes came out and I stopped going. I wasn't interested in that. But then the first time I did go to commercial, I just got invited to go on a trip. Someone had dropped out. And I must admit, perhaps as you're getting a bit older, it's nice to actually have a shower and a loo and
bit of comfort,
facilities. And I go once, twice a year now, and I really do enjoy it,
Yeah, I suppose you can section it off. It is holiday fishing, isn't it?
Exactly.
But I'd imagine sort of, back in the day, in the chapters we're going to come to on the likes of Raduta, Chanteloube, that's a completely different, that is pioneering. That is like back in the days where you haven't got a clue really what you're facing or what you're doing.
Exactly.
It's an adventure because you just don't know.
Yeah.
Quickly back to the UK. You talked there about you come sort of very much modern day in terms of the Cotswolds syndicate. Was there any other water syndicate, club lake, day ticket even that was a real poignant sort of chapter in your carp fishing?
Yeah, probably, and it's thanks to Kevin. He got me in a syndicate called Waterways in a little village called Hemmingford Grey in Cambridgeshire, and it was a beautiful lake. It really, really was. And me, Kevin, and Gary used to fish there a lot. And looking back, I can't remember. There were two 30s. I had them both. They were like the two biggest fish in the lake. But funny enough, that was the green-eyed monster, because when I first met Kevin, and not many people know this, but Kevin originally used to do quite a lot of coarse tackle. He did like landing net bags, rod holdalls. 30 years ago, you walked down the riverbank for a match and they all had Nash net bags and rod holdalls, the old black ones with the yellow stitching. And he also had a subsidiary of Nash called Pike Tech and made really good pike floats. I should have bought one to show you today because I've got one full of teeth marks where pike have grabbed it. But just, cigar slider floats. Yeah. And I was doing, I've always loved my pike fishing. I sort of grew up old fashioned, where you fish for carp and tench in the summer and chub, pike, seasonal. Roach in the winter, which I still do to an extent. And I got to know Kevin through that because he had a factory up in Norfolk and it was run by a policeman called Richard Furlong. Ex-fireman called Richard Furlong, sadly no longer with us. And I used to go up. I was mates with Dave Plummer when he was running Norwich Angling Centre, who obviously I've had a lot of adventures with around the world. And Dave introduced me to Richard, and Richard was running Kevin's pike setup. And Richard was also doing a bit of guiding up on the Broads, but he was like guiding for fishermen and charging them like next to nothing. And of course, the next week they're up there on their own fishing. And I said to him, Rich, you're mad. I said, you want to go corporate? Yeah, because you take a businessman. He's been taken for a day at Lord's. He's been taken to Twickenham. He's been to a test match, and he hasn't been fishing. And if he can go in the office the next day and show him a picture, even if you catch a 10-pound pike, it's going to look massive. So where Richard had been charging like something like, I don't know, 15, 20 quid a day, bearing in mind this is 30 odd years ago, I said charge 50, 100 quid a day and get businessmen. And so I did him some little brochures and that. And of course he was working for Kevin and he did it through Kevin. So Kevin came up to Norfolk and that was the first time I met Kev. Of course, I was only a pike angler. Obviously I like my carp fishing, but to Kev, I was a pike angler. And Kevin was really kind. He was taking, I think the bloke might have been Dave Benham, I can't remember, but through a magazine or something, this bloke was trying to catch a 20-pound carp or something. I can't remember exactly. Right. But Kev was taking him fishing to the arena in Essex when it was still a good...
Yeah.
And Kev said, do you want to come? And I jumped at the chance. So I went there with Kev and we just gelled, straight away and became mates.
How did you find Kev? How did you find him when you first met him?
well, you can imagine he's not like you, but like me and Kev, you know, we've aged and mellowed, and he's a toned down version, the same as anyone will tell you I am now. But in those days, we just, you know, similar age, similar interests, you know.
Yeah.
And he took me there. We had a good night's fishing there, and first time I'd seen anyone really cast properly. I remember, like, you know, the noise. I mean, people watching this, you know, we all know Kev doesn't do as much as he used to now, but I remember when he first cast out, I thought, what's that noise? I'd never heard that, you know, that real
speed.
Yeah, cool, he could whack it.
Yeah.
And we fished a bit together and did a few things, and me being a journalist, I helped him out a bit of writing stuff and catalogues. It's actually really sad, because I was with Kev before I came in here to see you, and we were talking about Phil Harper, you know, and, you know, I can remember, like, going over the snake pit with Kev, and Kev and I were just laughing. And, you know, if any of Phil Harper's family, you know, like, as a bloke, you don't often look at another bloke and think he's good looking. But Phil Harper was a good looking dude, you know.
Yeah.
And, like, I can remember doing the catalogue for him where we had Phil Harper on the cover, you know, with the Snake Pit Common, and, you know, forever people associate Phil with the Snake Pit Common. Yeah. Last time I saw him was at Langdedford pike fishing.
Really?
Yeah, bumped into him there, you know.
Wow.
And Kev met him as a 14-year-old schoolboy fishing on a little railway pond in Malden.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, really sad to lose him. But, and then Kevin and Gary had just got in this syndicate, Hemmingford Grey, called Waterways. And it was a lake in an old lady's garden. And someone had somehow got the fishing rights. It was next to another very famous lake where Kevin Maddox used to fish, called Eggett's.
Yeah.
There was literally just a wire fence between the two, and there was probably a rod length between each of the lakes. And so if you were sat in your swim, you could be chatting to someone in Eggett's, you know. But Kevin, Gary and I fished there quite a lot and did a bit of filming there as well. And I say, at the time, I had my two PBs, the 230. I had one of them. At that time, I was still playing rugby, and I was suffering with a really bad back. And I can't remember whether I'd just had surgery or was just about to have surgery, but I had a disc removed. And I don't know if I'd just been in hospital, just about to go, but I was crippled. And I remember catching this. It's the first one I had. I caught it, and Kevin was with John Middleton, who at the time was the boss of Daiwa.
Yeah.
And they were fishing further around the lake. And I've got this fish. I've got it in my landing net, rolled up, unhooking mat. And in those days, barrows hadn't been invented. And there was a wheelbarrow there, nothing to do with us, but just for, like, gardening and what have you. So I put my unhooking mat in the wheelbarrow, put the landing net wheeled it round, just because I was, you know, with my bad back, I couldn't carry it. So I run round to their swim. It wasn't far. First thing I want to do is, like, I'm worried about getting it back in the drink. So I put the landing net in the water to rest it. It got out of the net and got away, so I never got a picture of that one.
You're joking.
Yeah. And Kevin and John were laughing because I don't think I actually dived in, but I was, like, running after it, trying to rescue it. You know, I don't know if I'd had the other one or not then, but, you know, it was my first or second ever 30. I never got a bit. And I knew it was a 30 because someone had caught it previously, you know.
What a place. What was the fishing like in terms of the actual setup? Was it?
It was brilliant. And ironically, and it was good, you couldn't night fish. You weren't, I think it was because the old lady, you weren't allowed to night fish. So what I used to do, and this is typical me, we'd fish up until about, I couldn't tell you, 9:30. And then, like, we'd nip up the pub for last orders and have something to eat and a couple of pints. And then you go back, and they had literally a little Wendy house in the garden. So we'd sleep in the Wendy house and then get up at like 4 and carry on fishing. But me, before we went to the pub, in my swim, there's a lovely overhanging willows all round the lake. It was a beautiful lake. I'd chuck a load of corn and hemp in, fire some boilers out, and then in the morning at like first light, I'd be float fishing down the edge catching tench. And then after, when that went a bit quiet, I'd then put the carp rods out and fish for carp. So it was an idyllic place.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. How was Basie?
Two stories about Basie. One in those days, again, we've all changed.
Yeah.
But in those days, Gary was just unbelievable. I remember once someone was going up the chip shop, got us some chips, passed them to Gary, and somehow or other he dropped them, and they rolled down the bank, all like wrapped up in the paper, and went in the lake.
Went in the lake?
Yeah, went in the lake. Gary fished them out of the landing net and said, I'll have them tomorrow. And like ate them cold the next day. I always say, you know, like you, I've been lucky. I've met some really good anglers and I've fished with some of the best. And Gary, to me, an example of why he's one of the best I've ever fished with. There was at the time, like there were no catfish in this country. They hadn't been illegally brought in. Obviously, there's some in Claydon Lakes in Bedfordshire. But there was, I don't know how it got there, but there was one in this lake. And every now and again, you'd see it swim past you. It wasn't huge. I can't remember, maybe 25 pound or something. But Gary, he always used to brag. I don't know if you've seen Gary's rucksack. He'd always brag that in his rucksack, he could fish for anything. And this is what a great, sounds easy now, but like, so Gary sees this swim past. So he reels in one of his carp rods, breaks it all down, still a carp rod, but puts a float on and puts a little bit of bread from a sandwich or whatever, catches a little rudd, kills it, re-tackles up again, chucks it out, catches that catfish.
No way.
You know, it's just...
That's so basic, isn't it?
Yeah, he's been... I miss Gary. I used to fish with him ever such a lot. And we had some great times. You know, you and I off air were talking about Collingham the other day. We went to Collingham probably 25 years ago when it was £3 for a day ticket.
That's crazy.
There was no one there, you know, and we were still catching loads of barbel. But again, typical Basie, middle of the night, I see a torch in front of me. What's going on? He's in the river with his chesties on, catching sea fish like flatties and what have you, you know, in his landing net.
As a character, I don't... Well, him and Kev, to be fair, you don't know. There's not many people like that, is there?
Oh, no, I love Gary. I love
Brilliant.
him. And he's one of those people, like, you could fish with most people and you know they're better than you, but you're still in the same division as them. Like, you know, they're Man City, but, you know, you're still... Yeah, you're still in that division. You might be down the bottom half, but you see, whereas with Gary, he's just different level.
Mate.
And every time you fish anywhere with him, people will always come up. I remember when I used to fish Fen Drayton with him.
Yeah,
people all rock up in his swim and talking to him, and he'll tell them everything they want to know. It's a bit like, say, if you're with Lionel Messi, he could be doing keepy uppy, teaching you how to do it. Don't mean you can do it. He could tell you everything, and like Gary would tell everything. And I used to want to say, Gary, shut up, because at the start of the conversation, he says so it's a real gem, and you think, I can put that into my fishing. I will catch, and that's all you need to remember.
Don't give me the rest.
And then he's giving you so much, you're getting brain information overload. You can't cope, and it makes you feel...
That's exactly it, information overload. He came in, and I'd talked to him, but we'd not really had a very deep conversation. We did a whole podcast, and the lengths he talked to about nature and signs in nature, I was gone.
Yeah.
I felt like a little city boy.
That's right, because he'll
day in a flat.
You're sitting there fishing in the dark. Now, I love nature all my life. I love it. I'm biggest animal lover, and I can identify most things. But Gary, every single sound he can put a name to it. Yeah, he's so in tune, and he's so in tune with the lake as well, isn't he?
Yeah, totally, mate. It's different, as you say, different level.
I'd completely forgot. It's funny because, like, I can't stand, like, Kevin might have told you a story about us where I nearly had a fight with a customs officer when we're coming back from France once. But like, Kevin thinks I'm anti-authority or establishment.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not anti-authority. I'm anti-authority when the people in authority abuse that authority, which that customs bloke was like. And it's the same as I can't stand Jobsworth. And I'd as you get older, your memory goes. You'll find, especially all the bangs I've had on the head playing rugby. But I'd completely forgotten how angry I was till you were talking to Gary on the podcast about when he caught two-tone.
Yeah.
And they didn't accept his record claim, which was bang on. And things like that make me
so...
Yeah, and I was on the phone to him, Gary, I will sort it. I'll do the paperwork. Because I hate seeing a wrong that can be righted. Yeah. But typical Gary, I can't be asked.
He don't care.
Exactly. He's caught it. He had the recognition. Everybody knew. But I still think his name should have been on the record books.
Yeah, as I said, he literally couldn't give two hoots about
that's
it.
Right, and that's what you love about him, isn't it?
It's unreal. But fair play, mate. What an angler, incredible. And you've had a lot of sort of epic times with them. I think one point, what Kev has said with regards to you is, and I think it echoes, and we've sort of hinted a little bit at sport, at rugby. You're an incredible, decent level rower and swimmer, and you sort of brought all that into a lot of the fishing chapters that we're going to look at. I said pioneering before, and I think the first time Kev mentioned and talked in detail with you was your first trip, I believe, to Raduta.
Yeah.
Back in the day, sort of one of the first group of Englishmen to really go there. For you on there, going there, not really knowing a great deal about it, what was it like to go on there? What was it like in terms of setup? Because obviously Raduta being Ilie Nastasi's coach and then having a load of political sway and power in Romania, but also just being English going over to Romania at a time where I'd imagine, and Kev references it, it was pretty like poverty-stricken.
Oh, it was unreal. It really was unreal. I mean, Ceausescu had devastated the country. And, you know, we went on a wing and a prayer, really, because Raduta phoned Kevin. And out the blue, and just like he wanted, I think he wanted a bivvy or something. I can't remember exactly. Okay. So Kev phones me up and says, listen, this is probably a wild goose chase, but do you fancy an adventure? Because we'd had some great adventures in France, you know, hiding from gendarmes and all that sort of thing. And he said, do you fancy an adventure? He said, it's probably a complete wild goose chase. He said, but this bloke's phoned me up and he reckons he's got like monster carp in his lake. And so I said, yeah, I'm going, let's go. You know, even if we don't catch anything, it's worth it for the adventure. That's just, you know, right on my street, that sort of thing. Perfect. It's a shit or bust, isn't it? You know, and anyway, I'll never forget, between, you know, for all we know, this bloke is complete bullshit, but between us booking our flights and arranging to go, Bert Rosemeyer caught that world record carp.
Yeah, okay, so that's then, is it?
Yeah, so he's telling us the potential of the place, and we're thinking, oh yeah, it could all be Mickey Mouse. And then, of course, it's proved. But I've forgotten how big that carp was, 83 or something, you know. But, like, I mean, beyond our wildest dreams. I mean, in those days, when I used to go to Canada, I remember Terry Eustace wanting to come to Canada because he wanted to catch a 20-pound common. I mean, I expect every schoolboy now has caught a 20-pound common. They were rare in those days, you know.
An 80 is big now, isn't it? Let's face it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I mean, it was like, I don't know what. I suppose, what would the British record have been then? I don't know. But, you know, I mean, it was just, you know, it's a monster. And, I mean, 40s were still huge in those days, you know, and the thought, you know, if we'd have gone there and just caught 40s, we'd have been happy, you know, like it was just, anyway, so between us booking our flights, that happened. So now we're going thinking, God, this is, and the first night there, Dave Jordison came with us. And he had a brace of commons. I can't remember the exact weights, but I'm not very good at remembering things. I don't take that much notes. I don't write much down, but I think there's something like 46 and 48, something like that. Yeah. Bracer got the first night there. Now, he never had another fish. Now, to be honest with you, we didn't do very well. My biggest had a 39.5, but what a trip. It was fantastic.
Well, in terms of what? Just because it was so new and fresh and like...
So raw and rough. And like, I mean, when we turned up, I've told this story before, but when we turned up, Robert Raduta, as you say, he was Ilie Nastasi's tennis coach. Younger people won't remember Ilie Nastasi, but, you know, he was the Playboy tennis, as you know, obviously, the Playboy tennis star of the era, but from Romania, which was an Eastern Bloc communist country, run by a madcap dictator called Ceausescu. And so Robert Raduta has got lots of money and, like you say, sway. And so when we got off the plane, in fact, going back, Heathrow, I mean, this was before 9/11, everything. Heathrow, trying to get your baggage allowance when you can't buy anything there. So I'll never forget. I had like a photographer's waistcoat, a bit like a fly fisherman's waistcoat, but a bit more heavy duty. And I've got every pocket full of 4-ounce leads. My hand luggage is about 10 kilos of boilies. You know, it was real. We get on the plane. Again, sadly departed. Pinky was with us, Jeff Pink. And one of his mates, I can't remember his name, who was in the army. And we get on the plane and I think the beer was free on the plane. So I wouldn't say we got hammered, but we drank all the way, you know, and we get off the plane and they say the transport's take you to the lake. Well, the transport's a van. We had to drive it.
You had to drive it?
Yeah. So this army mate of Pinky's, who's half pissed, has to drive it. All we've got is like a map and some directions. The reason we chose him to drive, because he'd been in the army and he'd served in Germany or something. I don't know, or he volunteered. So anyway, we drive. When we get there by some miracle, and I mean, the roads were like pothole city.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It was tragic. In every lay-by, there's a couple of hookers, you know, like it was really, you know, really, it was like going back in time. Anyway, when we get to the lake, you've suddenly got this real luxury hacienda-style villa with tennis courts, obviously.
Oh, his house?
Yeah, his house, on the banks of the lake. And he had some Germans there. And again, I'll never forget it. These Germans, they were clay pigeon shooting. And Raduta used to get them in hookers as well.
Oh,
and,
God.
you know, you've got a bloke with like a girl in a miniskirt, high heels and all the makeup on with a hand through his arm there, like love you long time, while he's firing a bloody shotgun clay pigeon shoot. No health and safety, no.
Madness.
And then just as we got there, they were going in to sit down to eat in the dining room of this like villa that he lived in. And he invited us in, not to eat or anything. We were like the scum. We were just sort of stood in the corner.
Oh.
And do you know what? That sounds stupid, but I couldn't get there quick enough because it just had a flashback. You know the mafia films where they're all eating the minute someone comes in and mows them all down? Oh. It just felt like someone was going to come in and do that. It was just so seedy. So seedy and sinister. It really was. Anyway, we couldn't wait to get fishing. And there's another story there because everyone was in such a rush to go fishing. They left their bait behind. And Steve and I were the last to go.
Cleared up.
So we've got about 50 kilos of boilies. Yeah. And I think Steve still got them because he's quite nostalgic and keeps stuff. But like what they do is they had a speedboat that would come round to your swim every day and bring you your meal.
Wasn't that him? Didn't he come round?
Yeah, he did until I told him I worked for the Sunday Times and I wanted to do a story. And then I never saw him again. And that was definitely like set the alarm bells ringing with him. Yeah. But anyway, bloke would come around the speedboat. So we could send each other notes. We'd write notes. And it was like we want our bait back and we're like sending ransom notes for the bait, teasing them. But and the food, oh God, I remember like you chuck it in the lake, throw it away, it's so bad. And I remember I'm veggie anyway, but I had some meatballs and I chucked them in the lake. And at night you could see them, they were like glowing,
Oh,
no. Oh, I thought of Chernobyl. But the funny thing was like Raduta said to us, whatever you do, don't fish over there because that's where all the gypsies are and they'll cut your throat in the night and throw you in the lake. You'll never be seen again.
Jeez.
So the swim Steve and I are in, we're not doing that great. There's a hill behind us. There's an old farmer on the top of the hill, and he used to wander down to us every night, and we'd give him a beer. And in return, he'd give us milk, but we didn't want it because it was in like a fire bucket, and it was like more like yogurt than milk, And he'd stay with us until dark, and he didn't speak a word of English, but he'd be chatting away with us. It's like with fishermen, you can do all this.
Yeah.
And then you'd hear his wife calling him, and you'd watch him walking up the hill, half pissed, staggering up the hill. But halfway through the trip, we were struggling. And where the gypsy camp was, you could see fish boshing.
Right.
And if I wanted to go and see Kevin, he was about a mile away from me. And he'll tell you, I used to swim over to see him.
This is what he said to me.
Yeah,
you were swimming and rowing, he said.
Yeah.
You're a machine. You swim swim the lakes, no worries.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's nice to get some exercise. But anyway, we got the bloke in a speedboat to take us over to where the gypsy camp was. And honestly, they were just poor, poverty-stricken kids, and they were so sweet.
Were they?
And we got, at first, we're worried they're going to like nick stuff out of our bivvy and that when we were out in the boat or whatever. But I remember what we did was we got a stick and we drew a circle sort of round the bivvy about the same size again. And we got this one kid who was bigger than all the others, and they hardly spoke any English, but some spoke a little bit. Policeman? And it's, and said, you're the policeman. And we appointed him. No one was allowed inside that bit. And he took it really seriously. And one day, I felt so bad. Another kid, they were like pushing each other, trying to push him in the circle.
Yeah.
One kid got pushed. This policeman, I mean, they were only, I don't know, between 8 and 12 years old maybe. But this policeman smacked this kid a real, when someone catches a real right hand and you hear that horrible
flush. Yeah.
And you felt so sorry for this kid, and the policeman was all proud of himself. But these kids would come down every day, talk to us. And on our last day, when they knew we were going, their mums had washed them and brushed their hair and most of the time they were just shorts, barefoot, no shirt. And they had their best clothes on, everything. They came down to see us, and they wanted their picture taken. Now, it wasn't like, you could show them an image off the back of your phone or a digital camera. Yeah, it was slides in those days. They were never going to see that picture, but they wanted their picture taken. They were so sweet.
That's mad, isn't it?
They really were, yeah.
You think about, like, even take away the fishing in the lake and whatever, but you think about, like, politically where that country was at that time, and you guys going out there. That is mad, isn't it? Like,
well, when I did a story on it for Sunday Times.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and I researched Ceausescu a bit, and like David Steele, who was Foreign Secretary, UK Foreign Secretary, Ceausescu came to England. David Steele had a black Labrador, and he really liked it. So David Steele gave him, like in those days, you give presents, to heads of state. David Steele gave him a black Labrador. So he takes it back to Romania, and he appoints it a general in his army.
Oh, my God.
They built a new hospital in Romania, in Bucharest, and he was invited to go and open the hospital. So he goes along with his general. And the hospital, I mean, I don't know if you know, but he tried to create a super race and he injected all the babies with blood boosters and gave them all AIDS. And anyway, he the hospital, the hygiene's so bad, they got rats everywhere. So they deliberately had cats to catch the rats in the hospital. So he goes in with his general, the black lab, and a cat scratched its, never seen a dog before, and of course cat scratched its nose. He was so pissed off, he had the hospital knocked down.
He knocked the hospital down?
That's the story that I heard. I can't say that for 100%, but that's the story when I was researching for Sunday Times.
I heard that the lake, he pretty much just, didn't he want to make some sort of
like a Suez Canal? Yeah, he wanted to make a Suez Canal out to the sea, and that's why he just flooded the village.
Yeah, and he just gave him a few hours' notice.
If the water level was low, you'd see a church spire there, and you'd literally, when you were swimming, if you were like wading in the edge, there's human bones. You know, there's cemeteries there. These kids were saying, my granddad's buried out there in front of you.
I think I remember speaking to Rob Hughes about it because he ran trips out there subsequently.
That's right,
but he was saying like people were making rod rests out of femurs and stuff. It was just madness.
Yeah, no, it was spooky.
That's horrible, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then when we left, he had a bit like a sort of horse boxy type thing with all our kit in, and we're in a minibus, and they actually drove us to the airport this time.
Oh, so you got transport back?
Yeah, they drove us. But another, like, just the seediness of it all. We're in the minibus, and like you can imagine, it pissed down half the time we're there. Our stuff was all caked in mud, and you know, it was horrendous. And when we got just before the airport, he pulled over. What are you stopping for? And he goes around, opens the back of, and we jump out thinking, oh, he's going to nick our tackle or whatever. Two bloody poor girls got out.
They were sitting with all the tackle.
Yeah, so they've been, you know, abused by these German hunters all night, and then like, never mind the walk of shame. I mean, they could have sat in the minibus with us. These poor girls. You know, I don't know what's worse, being, you know, bonked silly by some horrible Germans. Excuse me, any Germans listening, but you know, or in with all our slimy, muddy fishing gear. Oh, it's just terrible.
That's pretty grim, isn't it?
And although I loved the fishing and I loved the adventure of it all, I didn't really want to go back. I didn't really.
You just did the one trip then, did you?
Yeah. I knew what I learned on that trip, I knew I could have gone back and cashed in, as you always think. But to be honest with you, I just, you know, it left a bad taste in the mouth. Yeah.
Aside from that, talk to me about what you said, what you learned, what in terms of how you approached it, and if you were to go back, you obviously caught a few. It wasn't. Yeah, it was hard. But what would you learn around those fish? Because there was some, as you say, there's an 80-pounder in there, but there was some incredible fish.
Yeah, we still didn't know at that stage. You know, those two that Jordo had were the two biggest fish we had. I had a 39.5, had a big grassy, but you know, we didn't set it alight. But you know, you learn a lot about dealing with the snags and what have you. And again, the other thing is, don't listen to him. Just bloody move. You know, just move on to fish.
Right.
Yeah.
So I imagine like the shows on there must be mega, mustn't they? Yeah. That is exciting if you're on it, I suppose.
Yeah. We never got on them. You know, and I don't think they're really having it because again, I don't think Kevin and Gary struggled. You know, it was a tough trip and the weather was horrendous. But you know, you still loved it. You know,
the adventure.
You still loved the adventure and the experience. But and fun enough. In fact, I was going to go back the following year. I think I've just remembered this. Kevin and I were going to go back, and I don't know what, he had an offer of something, but he phoned me up feeling really bad. He said, "You're going to hate me, but I don't think I can go next year." And I can't remember what his reason was, but at the same time, Joe Taylor said to me, "Do you fancy coming to Kazakhstan?" And of course, that really floated my boat. No one had been there, and that was real wild and remote.
Carping?
No, we caught carp there, but the idea of going there was catch a world record catfish. And so Kevin was phoning me. You imagine, like, Nigel, you're going to hate me, but I don't think I'm going to go. And I said, brilliant. I said, it saves us going back to that shithole and I can go to Kazakhstan. I went to Kazakhstan and had many years of going to Kazakhstan and some brilliant adventures.
What's that like, travel-wise?
That made Romania look like, you know, the West End.
I bet.
Yeah, that was the Wild West. I mean, like, it all starts when you get off the plane, you go up to the airport, you go to give your passport, and the bloke says, "Problem, sir. What's the problem?" "I need money." "How much money?" $100. And like me, my hating.
How did you make it into this?
I said, like, F off. I said, try some other mug. And Joe's a bit of a panicker. And Joe said, Nigel, just give him the money. Just give him what he wants. And I said, no. I said, you're a disgrace to your country. And I just walked past him and, got in. But then you'd get, the first time we went, we had an interpreter. I think his name was Yanni. I can't remember. But he was really sweet kid, but really scared. And you'd be driving in the middle of the night and all of a sudden there's a roadblock. And you don't know whether it's soldiers, police, or just bandits who are going to rob you.
Free for all, yeah.
And it was horrendous. It really was. And I've told the story before, but one day we were on the river and we're a boat coming. Now there's no other boats. You are literally in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's a mega drive by car, mega drive by boat. You are in the middle of nowhere and there's no one, there's no phone signal. There's, no one's going to help you if you're in trouble. And we hear a boat and, oh shit, this, who's coming? And these two blokes in the boat come along and they are serious desperados, gold teeth. They've got a rifle. And I say it.
Pirates?
They were poachers.
Oh, God.
Anyway, you can see them looking in our boat, your camera, your rods and reels, and more money than they'll have in a lifetime. And it'd be dead easy for them to just, put a bullet in you. And we've got, luckily, the guy with us, our guide, Yuri, he's got a tank tattooed on his chest. He was commander in the Russian army of a tank regiment.
Okay.
And interestingly, he loved us. We got on really well with him, a bit like in India, no English virtually at all the first time we went. And then Joe soon taught him a few swear words and he taught us a few swear words. But, eventually you could communicate really well. He spent 12 years in the Russian army and every day they were told, tomorrow the West are going to invade, be ready. And you'd think that would make you hate any Westerner, but he was brilliant. He was an ex-boxer. He had a nose over here, hard as nails. So anyway, these blokes signed us up. And he's got this rifle and he had a little cardboard cartridge case. So I said to Yuri, ask him how many bullets he's got.
Oh, these are the bandits that had
Yeah. So I said to Yuri, ask him how many bullets he's got. So he opens the box and I don't know, say there's 10 in there. I can't remember exactly. I said, tell him I'll give him $1 each for them. And also, I always I'm an anti-smoker. I hate smoking. If I'm going on holiday, someone says, I'll bring us back some duty-free fags. I say, no, I'm not putting a nail in your coffin. But when I used to go on all these trips, India, I always used to buy 200 or even 400 fags because anyone bent, corrupt or nice, chuck them 20, 40 fags. It goes a long way. So I give these blokes 20 fags each. Marlborough, they think they're the business. And then I said to Yuri, I'll give him $1 each for those bullets. So he took my hand off. So I give him the money. And I hate guns as well. I really don't like guns.
Right.
So anyway, I go and get a beer can, stick it in a tree. And when we were kids, we used to go on outward bound courses and I fired all sorts of rifles and magnums and, and it's not that hard to be if you're sporty. I'm sure you'd be the same. You're quite a good shot. Anyway, I get the 10 bullets and I've got this rifle and I'm firing and I'm deliberately missing because I want to use them all up. And Joe said to me, Joe comes out and he whispers to me, I'm lying down. And Joe said to me, didn't think you like guns. I said, I effing don't. I said, but at least if I use up all his ammo, it'll be a fair fight. Because I just imagined that as we drove off in the boat, they just put a bullet in us,
That's smart from you.
Yeah.
I don't know what
survival.
I'd have done, mate. I'd have got that motor going on that boat and gone. Catfish or no catfish, I'm out of it. How was a catfish? Did you catch any big ones?
Oh, yeah, we caught huge ones,
What are you talking? Give me some poundage.
Well, the biggest I had was 165. Yes. Joe had bigger. And at the time, the world record, I think, was 201 pound, and that had been caught in Kazakhstan.
So that wasn't an Ebro fish, no?
We could have... In those days, Ebro fish weren't nearly that size. No, they were... I remember Derek Quirk used to be on the front page, angling over 100-pounder. They were bait at that time. Ebro were tiny compared to what we were catching there. And if we wanted to be dishonest, we could have had a world record because there's some other poachers who were actually all right and they were friendly. And what they used to do, amazing way of fishing, they'd catch carp and you wouldn't have this, but anyone my age, their mum would have probably had a clothes prop for the washing line, which was like a bit of wooden stick about sort of 10 foot long with a fork in the end that the washing line sat on. Okay. So what they do is they'd get trees like that. So like a long bank stick, if you like, but, maybe 10 foot long. What they'd stick it in the rushes in the edge and they'd tie a bit of rope to a tree trunk or something. It's not going anywhere. And then they'd put it over the V of the rod rest, if you want to call it a rod rest, and then lower it down with a great big hook and sadly a carp of about 5, 6, 7, 8 pound. And it's pretty cool, really, because they'd have it. So it's just kissing the surface. So it's like if you've got a live bait mid-water on the bottom, it just lies there and keeps still. Whereas, of course, the poor carp is trying to swim into the water all the time. So it's making a surface disturbance. And then what they do is they'll put 20 or more of these along the bank. And then the next morning they come along in their boat and they drive along. And, of course, all they're looking for, if they're up there, the carp's still on. If it's flat, they know they're at a take. Yeah. And, of course, the catfish has just swallowed it. And they just pull in, get the bit of rope, pull it in. And one day they actually called us over. And felt bad, really, because they had this monster catfish, biggest thing you've ever seen. It's half dead. And we said, we've got to weigh it. And we got the oar to their boat. And it's like, I've got it on my shoulder. Joe's got to snap the oar in half.
Jeez.
I think, like, where do they get another oar? I don't know. But anyway, we apologise, give them 40 Marlborough. And I've forgotten exactly what this one weighed. I think it was £209. Now, I mean, there's no one around. If Joe and I had been inclined, we could have had our photo taken with it. We'd be heroes world record. But, I wouldn't have dreamt of doing it. And the sad thing was they were taking it for market.
Were they? Yeah.
And afterwards, I asked Yuri what they'd have got for it. My memory's not great. I can't remember what it was. But whatever it was, I'd have given them that money to put it back, which would have been pretty pointless because they'd probably catch it again the next day. They're raping the river. They got them all in the end.
Was all your fishing on there like live bait fishing, or was it, because obviously like
dead bait mostly?
Okay, dead.
Clonking, which is, I don't know if you've ever been clonking, but it's one of the most exciting forms of fishing I've ever done, because you're drifting down the river on the current, and your bait is literally 18 inches, 2 foot under the surface, maybe 3 foot under the surface, and you've got the line in your hand. And I'm not a good clonker. Joe's a brilliant clonker. I don't know if you've heard it go. That sort of noise. And they'd say different things. They say they think it might be the noise they make when their tails slap when they're spawning, but whatever it does, it
attracts them, doesn't it, up?
If a river's been clonked before, then it doesn't work as well. But if you're on a virgin river, they've never seen the clonk, it's deadly. And again, the clonk, for anyone listening, looks a bit like a dagger, but on the end, it's sort of circular, convex. And so you push it in the water and out again. So you sort of go like that, stab the water, and that's what makes the noise. And sometimes they'll actually grab the clonk out of your hand.
You're joking.
No. But you're drifting along, and the takes can be very gentle. Like you're holding the line in your hand, your rod's across the gunnels of the boat like that, and you've got a little bit of slack line, and you just feel a little bit like someone getting your shirt sleeve and doing that. And it's so exciting because any noise, like you've got to be, you're barefoot in the boat, any noise, they'll spook them. So you're not even talking to each other. It's really atmospheric because you're just drifting along, whispering to each other.
Just that clonk going.
Yeah, and just the clonk. And then you get that little, and so you let go of the line straight away. You pick your rod up as quietly as you can, and you watch that coil of line that was on the floor of the boat go out. And then once it's tight, you strike. And then, of course, because it's so close to you, you get the big explosion. Yeah, you get £100, 150, 180 pound catfish going mental. It's brilliant. And it sounds blasé, but like they're really, as you know, they're really slimy. And unless they're £100 minimum, they ain't coming in the boat. It's not worth the mess. Yuri wouldn't have them in. But it was fantastic. And
I've seen clonking with an echo, and I've seen like footage, and I've seen like as the clonk comes, you can see the shape come up.
Oh, one day we're drifting along, and I wanted a leak, and I stood up to have a pee over the side, and there's about 3 following the boat.
Oh my!
It was fantastic to see them. They're all £100 plus, just swimming along behind you.
Yeah, they're proper impressive things.
Oh, they
I've
really
caught them on the
are.
Ebro. I've said I've never been to Kazakhstan, but that is some size of catfish out there at that time.
And I had a £30 carp there on a spinner when we used to use Asper's bait, and I was spinning for Aspen. I had a £30 carp. Took a spinner.
Did you see any bigger than that? Or were they?
No.
Right. Wow.
The other thing that was big there, apparently, we always talked about going back there to fish for them, but never got around to it. But they get really big zander there.
Do they?
Caught lots of little ones. I always take a little rod, like always got.
Light,
And I used to, it's funny because there's that rod out there trying to catch a world record catfish, and off the back of the boat, I'm sitting there like with a little rod like this, catching zander about this big and catfish about that big that looks so beautiful. And then every now and again, of course, you hook something that like nearly busts you up. But,
yeah. Unreal.
Yeah.
You referenced Raduta. We've talked about a little segue into Kazakhstan, but another place, Dadair or Chanteloube, whatever you want to call it,
a mega, again, vast sheet of water. And again, you being quite sort of intrepid on sort of your angling and your early exploits on there. For you, as a venue, I know that there's Cassian, there's others, there's sort of significant standout venues, but Dictator and Chanteloube, I know you spent some time on. What was the fishing like going on to there and being immersed in all that?
Oh, it was fantastic. I mean, Joe Taylor, again, is a great mate of mine. We've been all around the world fishing together, but, you know, Joe is the ultimate secret squirrel. He's like the naughty boy. He loves having a secret and no one else knows. And he discovered Lac de Deux just looking on the old, you know, the old Michelin map of France, you know, going experimenting bits of water. And he found it. And, you know, I'm grateful that he put me onto it. And the first time I went with Dave Plummer and Richard Furlong. This was way before Dave was ever a guide. And we just went there and we had a brilliant trip. We fished along the wall there, which was a bit like being on a beach. It was fantastic. And we used to fish 2 spots. We'd like row up. No, Joe, the first time we went, never even had a boat or anything. I was swimming my baits out.
Were you?
Yeah, swimming them out, yeah.
How far were you swimming them out?
About 100 yards, you know, and just like had a washing up bowl that we had for washing up. And I just like load it up with boilies, swim the bait out and drop it down. But you could do a pub cast and catch. It was just fantastic.
Were they quite naive at
that period? You know, I don't know what we're talking, 91, 92. That they were naive. You know, if you were on them, you could catch them. And then I went. I don't know if I went a couple of times. And I mean, Joe is the ultimate nightmare for like playing jokes. In the end, we used to have a truce because I remember in India it got to a stage where he'll always remind everyone when I had to say, I said to him, a joke's a joke, a laugh's a laugh, and a smack in the mouth's a smack in the mouth, because it sort of got a bit. Yeah, but we used to do terrible tricks on each other. You know, we really did. But Joe, like, would come round in the night pretending he was Jean. He'd come around in the daytime. He was fishing somewhere else in the lake. Come in the daytime. I think the police are going to come tonight. Because of course no night fishing.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And then, of course, Joe was, again, where I say Gary was a good fisherman, Joe's a brilliant fisherman, because when you define a good fisherman, like some fishermen, like Trevor West, when he's got a fishing rod in his hand, it's like a magic wand, you know, he's just, you wouldn't have to know anything about fishing to see that bloke's good at what he's doing. Yeah. Joe's not that type, but Joe will do whatever needs to be done. Like he'll learn to speak French. When we went to Kazakhstan, he learned to speak Russian, you know. He fishes in the jungle in Suriname now. He can speak Spanish, Portuguese, whatever. Wow. He'll learn to use an echo sounder. He'll learn to clonk. And like in France, he learnt to speak French, and he had the old big mag light, and he turned up in the middle of the night, like jabbering away in French, garde de pêche, and like everyone's panicking, trying to reel in and that. You know, oh dear, we had, you know, so many wind-ups and that, you know. But then I went with Kev.
Yeah.
And we had some brilliant adventures. We used to go in his old Toyota Hilux, and I know we went in that a couple of times, but then at the time, when I first came out over here, I had a Renault Espace, and of course, although it had English plates, it still didn't stand out. So what we used to do was, I had an Orkney spinner that I used to use for pike fishing, and so we'd tow my Orkney spinner, we'd park in the sailing club, leave the trailer in the car there, launch the boat, and of course, you know, even though the plates are English, an Espace doesn't stand out there with a trailer on it in a sailing club. Yeah. And it was, when I was a kid, I used to read, my sister's 2 years older than me, and I used to sort of read her books. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Famous Five.
Yeah.
I think they did a TV series of it.
They did.
Yeah, they used to like have a holiday on an island, and as a kid, that was what you dreamt of. And so we'd row out to an island on the lake, Kev and I, and we'd just swim and pretend to be holiday makers in the daytime. But what we're really doing was looking for spots with the fish finder and what have you, and baiting up. And then we'd fish at night.
What sort of spots? Were you looking at different depths? Or
depths and distances. I remember one trip, I don't know if it was with Kev or somebody else. I remember one trip, what we did, we row the baits out. What we'd do is we'd see how far we could cast, and the fish were showing a bit further. We'd see how far we could cast, so we'd bait at that line, and then we'd bait further out where the better spots were, rowing them out. But what you knew was, of course, if you had 3 rods, you're almost guaranteed you get 3 takes during the night, but you weren't going to row them back out. So, of course, you'd just do a pub chuck to that line where you knew you had bait there as well. So you had bait here, a bit like a pole angler, baiting at 13 metres and 16 metres. So I used to do that, and that worked really well. because there's nothing worse. We've all done it where you boat the bait out, and then in the night you get a take and you can't get your bait back there. So of course we were baiting at pub chuck range, and that worked really well.
Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah.
Simple hair rig fishing and boilie, or was it corn as well?
Do you know, it's funny because I remember things we seen, because again, in those days you were using kinroos, which were spade ends, so tying the hair was harder. And what I used to do was, tie your hook on just a normal Palomar, or I don't think I've even heard of a grin of them, but sorry,
Spade,
we're talking about spade.
yeah.
So you do, funny enough, you do the old whipping knot that I used as a schoolboy and I still use now for big fish. Never let me down. Even with an eyed hook, if I'm using heavy line like Masheer fishing, I still do that whipping knot like a spade end, So anyway, you do your whipping knot just to tie your hook on, and then they'd have a bit of silicone, almost like a liner, but it wasn't for that. And then you'd whip on. They used to sell Dacron, that you'd use for your hair. And then what I'd do is I'd whip it onto the hook link, 'cause in those days it'd be soft braid. So I'd whip it onto the hook link, maybe an inch away from the eye or the spade of the hook. And then you'd put your boilies on, and then with your silicone, you could just tease it out the length, or you could pull that knot back along your hook link a bit to adjust the length of the hair, if that makes sense.
Yeah, nice.
And that worked really well.
You had good hits of fish, I remember.
Yeah, and again, we worked a lot then. Of course, there was a lot of snags because of, again, a flooded valley, so you had a lot of tree roots and what have you. So again, we worked away on breakaway leads, like, you'd cut the swivel off the lead, and then that other little bit of, the little bit of metal, like the loop, you'd cut that so that hopefully it would fall off on the take. And it was from there that Kev worked on the safety bolt bead.
Yeah, exactly. He mentioned all that. He did mention that, basically the numbers of fish in terms of when they were on you in specific points, it being unbelievable fishing in terms of catches.
One of the few times you're praying not to get a take, Kevin might have told your story. There's a picture in his book of him in the mint field that I took. But if they'd have been a bit smarter, we'd have got caught, because middle of the night, this wasn't on an island, we were on the bank this time, but middle of the night, we're bagging. And I think we'd both just caught fish and we've got them in the landing net. Hadn't even got them out of the water. And then we heard a boat from a real distance. So we're now, again, like, is it coming our way? And it's getting louder and louder. And then the engine cuts and they think they're going to creep up on us. Now, I don't know if they'd seen us in the daytime or some reports, but they obviously had in their mind there's fishermen somewhere on this bank. And there was rushes in front of us, and there was beautiful mint bed. There's a nice photo, as I say, in Kev's book, and I think it's used in some of your ads. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Of Kev, he's got the old black Nash T-shirt. I took that photo the morning after of one of those fish. And anyway, they come along and they're now paddling this inflatable. There's about 3 gendarmes or garde de pêche in the boat, and they're literally 2 rod lengths in front of us paddling, and they're whispering, but of course they don't have to whisper because we know they're there. And we're lying down. I don't know if you've had that feeling when you feel they can hear your heart beating. So, because I mean, you're not going to get sent to prison, but what they did in those days, they confiscate your tackle.
Okay.
And then you had to go to court, which would mean going home, coming back for the court appearance, pay the fine, and then they'll give you a tackle back. So, and of course your trip's over, but it's still really exciting. You're loving it at the same time, the naughtiness and the danger of it.
Yeah.
But of course we're lying there and you're thinking 2 things. 1, those 2 carp in the net, please don't splash, And 2, of course, I still might get a take, and you don't dare take the rod off the rest because it's going to beep. And in those days, I can't remember whether I was on optonics or dye was sensitrons, but
that's horrendous, isn't it?
And of course, we've been catching. And of course, you're thinking, any minute now, if we'd have got a take, we're caught. Yeah. And it's the one, there aren't many times in your life when you're thinking, please don't get a take, but you're praying not to. And in the end,
did you get away with that?
Well, they just rode up and down, couldn't find us, and off they went.
You think they'd have seen a line or picked up a line?
Yeah, well, that's what they were going along with with an oar, trying to pick up line. So we were so lucky.
Take that.
Of course, when they've gone, it's like, it's like, yeah.
He also told me a story about you in your legs or your feet in the mud and rugby or something.
Oh, yeah, the mud was horrendous. We got a system. We'd have about 4 buckets so that when you caught a fish, you had to wade out. Not in that swim, it was when we were on the island. It was this horrible clay mud, and it just stuck to you like the proverbial to a blanket. And so before you got back in your sleeping bag, after you'd like caught your fish, put it back, whatever, we started off just washing your feet in a bucket, but the bucket water got so dirty you couldn't get it all off. So it's a bit like stages, you'd like get the worst of it off in that bucket, then the next one, then that one, then try and dry it, and then try and get back in your sleeping bag. And then you're lying there thinking, oh, please, when you with a take, it's often like bib, 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 and then zzz. And when you get that bit, it reminds you like when you're at school and your alarm goes or your mum's trying to wake you up. It's like, oh, go away. And like when you're really mad keen, you fish 3 rods. And like I say, every time you catch a fish, you put it back out. But it gets to a stage you caught so many and you're so tired, you don't put that one back out. Yeah. And then when your third one, it's like, oh, thank God I can go to sleep for the rest of the night now. But when you're younger, you're keener, you keep putting them back out. And you think, what did I put that back out for? But yeah, we've been wading in the mud for a week and your calf muscles would go, you'd be really sore, your calf muscles from it. And I think we got home on a Friday night and on the Saturday, it was the first day of the rugby season. I remember playing the game and my feet were killing me and the ground was rock hard. And I just thought I should have worn moulded, but I had like alley studs. And I was just thinking, it's the rock hard ground. And after the game, I couldn't wait to get the change to take the boots off. And they were just lacerated. They were just cut to it. And I was like spent the evening picking thorns out of them. It was
savage.
It was brutal, but brilliant. And another funny story. There's probably still a petrol station attendant tells the story of the 2 gay Englishmen. Because I remember we'd been on the lake for a week, and you just live like dogs. We're swimming and cleaning our teeth. I can't. It's funny. I remember we used to take 25 kilo sacks of Scopex squid, but I can't remember us taking any food or I can't remember what we did for food. But anyway, we live like dogs. And after the week, we pull off the lake. We're driving home. We pull into a petrol station, fill up with fuel, and we wanted to use the loo for a wash.
Yeah.
And it's one of those ones where it's round the side, and he gives you the key. So he gives us the key. We go in, and there's just like basically a loo and a sink. So we're both bollock naked, washing our hair, washing ourselves. First wash we've had for a week. So we're both like foam, shampooing our hair, covered in soap and sort of just at the sink doing this. And like we've been gone maybe 5 or 10 minutes and the bloke's thinking, what are they up to? And he's come and opened the door, and he sees 2 naked blokes covered in soap. He must have wondered what. And it was.
Did he shut the door?
Yeah, he ran out. Ooh la la! And like ran out. Mercy, Oh God, we just carried on, got dressed, and took the key back and had a laugh.
What an experience, man!
And I think that was the trip where I did have the big row with the customs officer on the way back because again, towing my boat, and again, you can imagine the back of my boat's carnage. There's like landing nets, sacks, slings, all. Maize, hemp, broken boilies in the bottom of the boat. And we got off, and what pissed me off was on the way out, just for boredom, there was a nice little printed leaflet about customs and how we're here to help you and protect our country. And, it was in the early days of customer care, and this touchy feeling, how lovely, what nice people we are. And then when we got off the ferry, we're driving out, and there's a customs boat steps out and goes like this. And I was driving Kev's old Toyota Hilux with my Orkney spinner on the back. And he wants to put us into this like sort of garage. And it's just so officious the way it was like in there,
Yeah.
And I said to him, do you mind asking, why you want me in there? And he was just a real arse. And the conversation stuff, because I was really polite. I just said, because the thing is, if I go in there, it's going to be really difficult for me to reverse out. Yeah. And he said, well, you're going to be in there for ages anyway. It doesn't matter. And I said, why? And it pissed me off because reading all this touchy feeling, and he was being so officious. And looking back on it, he was probably trying to get a rise out of you, see if you're sweating, if you have got drugs, whatever. And I said to him, why? He said, because I think you're a drug smuggler. And I said, and I just said, I think you're a see you next Tuesday.
Yeah.
And he said, that's just cost you another hour. And I said, in that case, you're an even bigger.
And you've gone here, haven't you?
And Kev's going, shut up, Nigel, shut up.
Gone.
Yeah, I've gone big time. I call him everything and I tell him, because the other thing that was annoying was over there was a sniffer dog.
Oh,
and
God.
I said, look, if you think we've got drugs, I said 2 seconds. And he was just being a real job's worth. And I'm thinking also, while we're doing this, there's probably people with drugs coming past,
Yeah, easy.
But Kevin's going, shut up, Nigel. Anyway, we got out in the end, but Kevin was like having kittens a bit like Joe in Kazakhstan.
Lamp
but
him, mate. I thought you'd get out and stand up and lamp him one, which
Yeah.
wouldn't have been a good look at
it
all.
wouldn't. I've mellowed with age.
I don't know, mate. We'll go to customs and see what happens if you get pulled over. One place that I remember seeing it on tight lines, actually. I can't remember it. Yeah, what year? But a place that sort of, it opened my eyes to sort of carp fishing outside of Europe. I'd seen France. I'd seen sort of the rumours of like Cassian. I'd seen things published about, the likes of Dictator and even Raduta. I think I'd seen something on or read. So I was sort of well versed in that, but I hadn't really seen much when it comes to sort of Canada. No. And I think I remember you on a Tight Lines episode covering a session in Canada, but I know that you'd been there a few times.
Yeah. I was lucky. I used to go to Canada quite a lot skiing, and I'd been lucky enough to go there on a couple of rugby tours.
Okay.
And when you're there, you're always asking about fishing and whatever, and you think of it as all trout and that. And you start to hear about carp, and of course they call them trash fish.
Yeah.
And then got in contact with a Canadian guy who was a big trout and salmon angler. And I met him there. That's right. So anyway, in the end, I decided I'm going to go there and try and catch carp
On your own?
No, I went with Dave Plummer.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, that's right. We went to this place called Pickering, which was a power station. We thought they liked the hot water, and we got sent. So we were told you got to catch your minnows. So we've got a bottle trap like you used to a kid. We catch minnows, then we're told they're the wrong ones, and you got to do. And we just couldn't catch. And then I said to Dave, right, I've had enough of this. And we had a hire car. We drove to a petrol station. I bought a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
Went back, just like when you're a kid, size 4 hook, virtually a whole slice of bread flake, whack it out. And I think it's £35 common. Unbelievable. And at that stage, like, as I say, Terry, when I got back, Terry used to want to go. He'd never, great angler, like, been on the great maggot race, whatever it was called on telly, one of my heroes, never caught a £20 common. They were rare in those days. Again, this was 1990, 91. And never mind a £30 common, a 35, just stunning. And we caught loads. We had a brilliant time. And then we made friends with a Canadian guy called Martin de Cruz, and he was funny. He said, it's a trash fish. He's laughing at our unhooking mat. He wants to put his size 12 boot on it, And we were saying, what's a proper fish then? He said, salmon. And we said, well, like F the salmon, we want to catch carp. And then he said, I'll take you salmon fishing, and then you decide. And he took us that night. We got in his truck and we drove to Niagara Falls.
Niagara Falls?
Yeah. And at the foot of Niagara Falls, it goes straight for, I can't remember exactly, but maybe a mile. And then it does a complete right-handed bend, complete right angle. And there's a massive whirlpool there. It's called the Whirlpool. The cable car from the falls goes over it. You might have seen it because when I went back years later with Tight Lines, I did a piece to camera in the cable car looking down the pool.
Yeah.
Anyway, that Whirlpool, bit of trivia, Captain Webb, you're too young to remember. Do you remember that there used to be matchboxes with on the front of the matchboxes? I mean, no one buys a box of matches now, but there was a guy on the cover called Captain Webb.
Right.
And he was an old Victorian with that sort of handlebar moustache and a sort of stripy swimming costume. And the reason Captain Webb was famous was he was the first person to swim the channel.
Right.
And in those Victorian days, hardly anyone could swim anyway. And so he used to do all different things for money. And like, they had him in London Zoo once in like a little, like those ponds you'd have in your back garden with the high walls, and he like swam for 24 hours, without touching the sides or the bottom or whatever, and people paid to go and see him in Victorian days, and he got paid to swim the Whirlpool.
To swim that?
10,000 people turned up to watch him.
Wow. When was this? In the 90s?
No, this would probably be late 1800s. I'd have to check, but late 1800s. But I read a book on him, fantastic book. But when he got there, he had a young wife and I think a kid. And when you see the Whirlpool, I've swum across nearly everything, but even I wouldn't swim in the Whirlpool. And he must have realised it was suicide, because what they did was they took him out in a boat. And as he got out the boat, the last thing he said to the boatman was because they'd offered him like, £1,000 or whatever, ridiculous amount of money in those days.
Yeah.
And his last words to the boatman, he knew what was coming. He said to the boatman, they will give the money to my wife still, won't they? Yeah. And he just got out the boat, washed away. Yeah, and that was him gone. Never even found his body.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's a lethal place, but it's beautiful. And so anyway, Martin took us there, and you fish at night, because what happens is at night there's such a demand from the hydro in the city in the daytime that the water level goes up and down because of the power station.
Right.
So at night it drops. All the salmon come into the pool because they're trying to migrate from Lake Ontario and come up, and of course it's a dead end, and they're all in the whirlpool, and you spin for them with a really light, they call them a noodle rod. You can almost bend them and touch there, really light, with about 8 pound line, a little multiplier, and you'd love it. It's fantastic. And of course, at night spinning in running water, you can really feel your lure working. You know, your senses are more acute in the dark, aren't they? When you can't see, and you can feel that when a salmon hits it. And like that night, I had 3 20-pounders.
Oh, really?
And so, of course, that was the joke, that it was like, F the carp, you know, we're going salmon fishing, and we had quite a few trips back just fishing for trout and salmon, you know, and caught some.
Yeah, that sounds epic.
Biggest I had a 28.5 pound salmon. I had a 14-pound brown. Martin had a 18-pound steelhead. We had some brilliant trips, great fun, but all the time I was still, and funny enough, my mate Martin, who I became mates with, he came to England, stayed with me.
Yeah.
He was taking us salmon fishing, yet he got into the carp fishing.
Did he?
So I then went back, because of course the big thing is everyone's saying like there's 60, 70 pounders, you know, and everywhere I'd been, rugby, fishing, skiing, I'd still never seen a picture one. But you wanted to try and find out, and of course you kept, a bit like Raduta, you kept hearing the story, so it's great, the adventures. So I used to go over there, and like I'd go even for a long weekend. And yeah. Wow. I was lucky at the time. I had a mate who was the passenger sales manager for Air Canada, and
nice.
Yeah, I got
good connection.
And I wrote articles for them and what have you. So you know, I wasn't, you know, it wasn't really costing me much, but we had some great times, and we had some fantastic. And of course, one of the times we were salmon fishing at Niagara Falls, just as we were packing up in the morning. In fact, it used to be we'd go in the winter, and it was seriously cold. I remember one time, talking about a long weekend, I played rugby on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Quick pint of Guinness in the clubhouse, taxi to Heathrow, overnight flight. He picked me up. But when he picked me up, it was still daytime there. And he said to me, the salmon are in, we're going to the whirlpool, like no shower, something to eat. And we drove straight to the whirlpool. In those days, I used to have like one of those ex-army Gore-Tex bivvy bags.
Right.
So you go down to whirlpool. It's a mega climb to get down there. And when we're at the bottom, you fish for a few hours, and then we just got so cold. We made a little fire with some driftwood, and I got in my bag. I went to sleep. And when I woke up, I was so cold, and I was really, really stiff. And I thought I was stiff because I played rugby, 10 hours earlier, and I'm sleeping on rocks. And I realised the reason I was so stiff was because my Gore-Tex bivvy bag had frozen solid, and I was like... Oh, it was. And the other thing, you have those anxiety dreams. You were talking about like drowning. I remember because the level came up, I dreamt that the level had come up and I'd been like washed out. You know,
you're a goner if you're in there.
Yeah, you would be. But I mean, we got spoiled by salmon there. It was fantastic fishing. But then one day when I was with him there, we're salmon fishing all night. And to tell another funny story, with the lures we used to use, there were some other blokes fishing like way over the other side of the pool. And I kept thinking, they're catching a lot of salmon because I kept seeing their flash guns going off. Right. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but you get like Enterprise corn, do that luminous corn.
Yeah, glow in the dark job.
And you get various things. And if you used to have a lure with a bit of luminous on it, and you'd ping it with a flash gun, and it would give you about 10 casts, and then it would dull, and you'd ping it with a flash gun again, and you get... And the salmon would home in on it. So that's what they were doing. We thought they're catching loads of fish. But anyway...
Charging up the lure, man.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, this morning we're packing up and it's just getting light. And I thought I saw a salmon. And I looked again. I couldn't believe my eyes. There's carp in there. Carp in the whirlpool. So I think we were going home. But I said to Martin, when I come back in the summer, we've got to go to the whirlpool, see if we can catch a carp. We caught shed loads.
Good uns?
Good uns, yeah. Well, I say good uns, I still not that. I think the biggest I've ever had in Canada is 37. I mean,
that's a good fish.
Mind you, bearing in mind this was in the early 90s. They're bigger now. I think they're bigger now. But we were catching doubles and 20s, and it was just great fun because you're holding the rod, not casting very fast out, hooking them in fast water. And I'll tell you a funny story. Is most people know I end up in the water. We were standing up to about our thighs. In the daytime, it's not quite as intimidating. For a start, you can see, and second, the level's a bit more steady. But it was a lovely summer's day, so I just had my boxers on, and I'm standing up to about my thighs in the water with just my boxers on, and I'm fishing away. And we said when we got to 100, we were going to stop because we just
100 carp.
Yeah.
Wow,
So
mate, that is prolific.
It got too easy. So I said, when we get to 100, it's 50 each.
You catch them on leads or just free lining from? What were you?
Just a little light lead and a couple of grains of corn,
Oh, my days.
And it was the first time I got confidence in plastic baits, actually, because I started off putting about 6 grains of sweet corn on with like one plastic tipping it.
Yeah.
And, of course, in the end, when you're catching so many, you can't be bothered to baiting needle, so you're just fishing the plastic one and catching just as well, and that gave me the confidence in it.
Yeah.
I'll never forget this. Again, like the bloke in France in the petrol station, there's probably 2 women hikers in because all the time I'd been there, apart from once seeing the guys with the flash guns, I never saw another fisherman or another person at the bottom of the whirlpool. Never saw anybody. You know what prudes, some Canadians can be. And Martin,
what have you done here?
So I'm standing like that, and of course your boxers are like, they're wet, and you probably wipe your hands on them, and it's the end of the holiday, so I'm going to launch them. So I said to him, when we get to 100, we're going to stop. We worked out we'd had about, we probably didn't start counting, but we think, God, we must be up to 50 now. Anyway, so I've got 1 to go. So I started packing up and I actually lent my rod on a branch or something. I can't remember what. And I took my shreddies off and I was going to put my tracksuit bottoms on. And just as I took them off, Mike goes, your rod. So I ran and grabbed my rod. So I'm now naked, which doesn't matter to me. I'm a rugby player, used to be in the changing rooms.
Exactly,
you've been naked bar diving, naked at the bottom of the whirlpool when you're not and no one for miles. And then I'm playing this carp naked, not bothered. And then Martin goes, it's just someone coming. Of course, I think he's winding me up. So I'm taking a notice. So I'm still playing the fish. And he goes, someone coming. And the next thing I hear a female voice say, afternoon, have you caught anything? And I look round, there's these 2 women. And they must have thought I was a naturist fisherman, that they wouldn't know I was just getting changed. I just chucked my pants away because they
could have ended very differently in a number of ways.
Yeah, it could have done. Yeah, don't go there. But
exactly.
Yeah, they just probably thought I was a naked fisherman.
But Canada, in terms of its potential, you said there that you probably didn't see the same size of fish that you saw maybe nowadays when you revisit. But the venues that you fished there, the amount of carp and the fact that they were very much sort of second class in terms of what was fished for. Did you always think that there was the potential of it doing real big carp?
I did in the early days, but then I realised that it probably wasn't going to happen, and I never saw any evidence. I never saw one. I never saw a photo of one. So that's probably when I slowed down and, other things come calling. But,
any mirrors or are they all commons?
Well, funny enough, that day at the whirlpool, 1 mirror. So 100 to 1 or 99 to 1, yeah. Wow. And that was when you saw Sky, because Andy, who used to be the producer at Tight Lines, knew I'd been there and seen the photos. I mean, I never send pictures into Angling Times or anything, but I think it was because of Air Canada. Yeah, I can't remember, but I sent a picture into Angling Times. And it's a picture of me with a brace, and I think it was a 33, and the other one might have only been about 18. But like everyone wanted to know where I was going, like in those days, that brace was like mega, and everybody, I want to go to Canada. Where'd you go? And that was amazing. But again, the Tight Lines. Tight Lines wanted me to take, you probably wouldn't remember, Fiona Armstrong. She was a bit of a pin-up newsreader, News at 10. And she was keen trout and salmon angler.
Salmon angler, that was it. Yeah.
Still lives up in Scotland now, married to a laird, I think, and bit of Stretcher River, Yeah. But I'd never met her. She'd been on Tight Lines. I'd never met her. So Andy Story said, will you take her to Canada, take her carp fishing? In fact, we went to Canada and we crossed the border and fished in America as well.
Did you?
And we had a brilliant time, and she loved it. We caught loads of carp. We went to the whirlpool. We went to a lake in America. I can't remember the name of it, but somehow or other, I don't know how, but they knew we were going to be there. And honestly, it was like being on Mastermind. There was about, not many of them, maybe 8 or 10 absolute fishing nuts fanatics, Americans.
Mate.
American Carp Society. And you know, these type of Americans, I've been all over America playing rugby, fishing, holiday. I love it. But like, they're asking you questions, but they know more the answers than you do. Yeah. They wanted to know every single thing. Like, had I been to Redmire Pool? They wanted to know everything about everything, but they knew all the answers. They were really, and they wouldn't leave me alone. They were nice blokes, but it was like
full on
serious punishment, you know. But Fiona was loving it. You know, I had it's funny because when you see a fly angler, they can't cast a lead, can they?
No, of course they
so
can't.
I just had a lead on and no rig and getting her casting, and she was loving it. And you know, I'd never met her before. I'd just seen her reading the news at 10, and she was so nice. She was such good fun, and she loved it. We had a brilliant time.
That sounds like
and
a good trip,
I remember
mate.
when it's funny because I never tried to be on tight layer. I've always been a journalist all my life, and I never really wanted to work in fishing because, like, the Angling Times, you know, is never going to pay you well, but also it's my hobby. You know, I want to like have a job and go fishing as my hobby. I never wanted to earn money out of it.
Yeah.
And everything I've ever done, tight lines, Fisherman's Blues, all been like by accident almost, you know, serendipity, if you like. But I'll never forget that morning when we were going to Heathrow. Like, they said, I will send a car to take you to the airport. And I was just expecting a little, you know, Datsun, you know, Nissan or whatever, you know, take you to the airport. And like, I can't remember if it was a Merc or a Beamer, but it was a nice motor.
Nige.
And the bloke gets out with a suit and tie. And honestly, I feel quite emotional saying this now, but as he walking, I was living in Twickenham at the time, as he walking up my garden path, my mum and dad were both dead then. And I had a tear in my eye because I thought, my mum and dad, the times they took me fishing, yeah, my mum would drop me off on her way to work and pick me up on her way back, or maybe my dad would drop me off and then she'd pick me up in the morning if I'd been all night or whatever. Yeah. And I thought, if they could see me now, like a car,
I know,
picking me up, driving me to Heathrow, and I'm going to get on a plane and I'm going to be paid to go to Canada and catch fish. You know, they'd have been, you know, like I feel bad now. Like, they saw me get chucked out of school and, you know, saw the bad things. They'd been so proud of me that day, and it really did put a lump in my throat now talking about it. You know,
that is as you say, some sort of end to that, isn't it? That fishing's got you all the way to there. Yeah,
tight lines. I mean, you know, we had such great gigs on tight lines.
Yeah.
I remember, you know, obviously, you know, I love my rugby, and I remember once they phoned me up and they said, "Have you heard of Raphael Ibanez?" I said, "Of course I have. He's captain of France, plays for Wasps now." And they said, "Oh, he's a keen fisherman. Wants you to go fishing with him." Yeah, all right, you know. And like, off we go to, I think it was called West Wickham or something, out near the Hellfire Caves in Buckinghamshire. Okay, it's like a private sort of country house type thing. Beautiful lake and river with big browns and rainbows. And there's Raphael Ibanez, played 99 times for France, captained them in the World Cup when they beat the All Blacks. And we're sat there catching these beautiful fish, talking about his love of Guinness, fishing, rugby, playing against the All Blacks, telling me how the night before the World Cup semi-final, to keep himself calm, he was tying flies in his hotel room. And you're thinking, am I going to put in an invoice for this? Yeah, you know what I mean? It's just, it was...
Yeah, that's mad.
And funny enough, that takes you on to another feeling of tight lines, because there's so many great, and again, met so many great fishermen, you know, who I fished with. And I remember when this is the way I read what happened with tight lines. People always say, you know, like when tight lines ended, it was really sad. There were viewers wanted to start petitions, you know, to keep it going.
I remember all that.
And I think my interpretation of it is BT Sport didn't exist. They started up. They bid for Champions League rights. And the way my interpretation, it's a bit like if you go to casino tonight, I'm not a gambler, but you go to casino tonight and do all your money. Tomorrow morning, oh shit, I've got to, like, you know, sell the golf clubs, the fishing rods, the car, remortgage the house, whatever. So Sky TV bidding for Champions League rights with BT Sport.
They bid too much, didn't they?
Bid way too much.
Yeah.
Next morning, knee-jerk reaction. The very next morning, they binned 11 programmes.
How long did tight lines run for at this point?
Oh, about 20 years.
That's madness.
It was the longest running programme on Sky, because it started off on Wire TV and Sky bought Wire TV. Yeah. So it's the longest running programme on Sky. And do you know what annoyed me? I mean, all good things come to an end, and, you know,
But that's
we'd had a great run.
it's not a nice end though, is it?
It's
that?
not a nice end. But what got me was the Champions League. I like football. Now, if I support Fulham, so they're not being champion. But if I watch a game of football on ITV or Sky or whatever, you watch it because you want to see that game. You don't care who the pundits are. Like, it always annoys me how much they pay Gary Lineker when there could be someone like you, say a young up and coming person. You could be presenting it just as well for like a fraction of the cost.
Yeah, you'd save money that way, wouldn't you?
They had, like average, you'd have, say, Gary Lineker, you'd have Ruud Gullit, Alan Shearer, and other. And I remember being told at the time, the money they were paying those pundits,
They'd be on a packet, wouldn't they?
what they paid one of them was about what it cost to produce tight lines for the week, with change. So when you're having your knee-jerk reaction, I'm not telling Sky to run their business, but why don't you just have one less pundit? Because most of the time, if it's me, you're out putting the kettle on having a cup of tea while the pundits are talking or whatever. You
just want to see the action.
So it was frustrating. And I remember it was quite sad. The last gig I did was with Keith, and we went out with Andrew Alsop on White Water. I don't know if you've ever been out with him, but shark fishing out of Milford Haven. And we had like a Carlsberg day. We caught big shark. And I had what for nearly the whole year was the biggest shark was caught. It was a 256-pound Port Beagle.
Yeah.
Awesome fish. The fight was such a hard fight. Andrew, during the fight, kept saying, this has got to be foul. Look, this fish is fighting so hard, and it wasn't. And, all on camera, the cameraman's,
Yeah.
And I remember at the end of the day, we shook hands with Andrew and the cameraman, the producer guys we'd worked with a lot, and Keith and I, had known each other before Tight Lines. We lived the opposite side of the river to each other. I knew him through Daiwa and what have you. And it was quite. If you were, say, walking off a lake, it probably wouldn't be quite. But you stepped off the boat, and it was as if that was the end of Tight Lines. You stepped from the boat.
That's gotta be
when you've had a day like that, and you're stepping onto dry land. It was a great way to finish. But it was also quite sad that, we'd had a great run.
So much emotion in
and
that,
even
though.
more so for Keith, because, I'd had some great gigs. I'd been to France with Tight Lines. I'd caught a 50-pound carp on camera for Tight Lines. I'd had some great time. But for Keith, he was Tight Lines, wasn't he?
Yeah, very much. I remember the Bruno days. I remember Keith being, and then Keith taking it over. For you, I remember those segments, Canada, like the sort of maybe adventure bits, but also it's fishery focus, wasn't it? At the end,
yeah.
I remember that, and the juniors, the Drennan juniors, or whatever.
Yeah, the Drennan juniors was
mega.
I mean, Peter Drennan, the way he supported the England team over the years, the way he supported, that Drennan, and you probably know Joe Jagger.
Yeah.
Joe Jagger was a junior. I took fishing, and it's quite funny actually, because those days he was a little Keene carp angler. And Peter Drennan invited us. I took Joe to Eynsham, Peter Drennan's lovely estate lake.
Yeah, nice.
And again, we're trying to catch tench. And, it's like tench fishing. If there's a load of rudd around, you've got to have your shot to get down quickly through the rudd. And I kept saying to Joe, change your shotting. But he was happy catching the rudd. He was only about 13. Yeah, and he was happy catching the rudd. And, of course, then he becomes the big carp angler. And, of course, it's not a surprise now when he's now mad into his match angling.
Yeah, he's proper on it again.
I think back to that day catching those rudd. He had it in him. He was happy catching lots of little ones.
It's crazy, yeah. As I said, mate, it was an institution. But on from that, like Fisherman's Blues, I know initially it was Keith's gig and he was sort of on, TalkSport, as it was pretty much came to be TalkSport. But you sort of throughout the course of time inherited that, and that's been an institution in terms of length of time. I don't know how old TalkSport is. I've no idea.
Well, I think it's 21 or 22 years now. Time flies, because they, it seems like yesterday. It's probably 2 years ago. The book came out, 20 years of TalkSport.
Well, there you go.
And Fisherman's Blues has been on there since the beginning. And originally, like you say, I used to cover for Keith when he was on holiday. He used to go to Florida. That'd be 3 weekends. He'd go to Florida twice a year. So I used to cover for him. And then when he retired, they offered me the gig, and it is. TalkSport is the world's biggest sports radio station, which it sounds mad because you think how big America is. Because everything's regional. They don't have a national.
No.
Overall,
yeah.
So, it's the world's biggest sports radio station.
What's that like? 'Cause obviously, there's like presenting, there's sort of TV gigs where you're out fishing, and then there's the sort of added thrown in factor of like live radio, mate.
Yeah,
That's a lot. That can't be easy.
No, it's. I suppose it's probably a bit like, the swan analogy where it's all serene on top and doing this underwater. It's, it can be hectic. And there's been some sort of, I remember like once, a few things come to mind. One was when everything went down and I'm doing a live show while I've got an engineer literally crawling under my desk trying to fix things. That was pretty hairy.
That's not good.
And of course, callers, you're only one call away from losing your job. Like some of them, like you've got a dump button, but in the early days at Tightlines, Fisherman's Blues, you'll get a producer. I always describe it as, I don't know if you ever used to watch Frasier, but there's Kelsey Grammer, as Frasier, the radio host, and then the other side of the glass, he had Roz, didn't he?
Yeah.
That's a bit like that, like you're communicating with the person the other side of the glass.
So they're not in the same room as you?
No. So you're in a soundproof room, they're the other side of the glass, and you've got your headphones on. They can talk to you, but of course you can't talk to them. So like, just say you're a call and I'm talking to you, they can talk over into my ears, But what quite often, I remember one day, like you'll get blokes who've been on all night shift. They've done a night shift, but they're still, their last 2 hours of their shift is you. And I remember once saying, right, now time to go to an ad break, be right back after this. And you look up and he's fast asleep.
Yeah, he's cracked.
And as you get more experience, it's not so bad. But I remember in the early days when I used to cover for Keith, you just like basically want to get in, get out without anything going wrong. It's Keith's show, don't rock the boat, you know.
Definitely.
And like, you haven't got time to sort of, there'd be a massive silence if you like ran round and tried to wake him up. You can't throw anything at him because it's glass, soundproof. So you're just sort of burbling away, waiting for him hopefully to wake up, which could be another hour, so that used to be hairy.
Didn't you do that on Tight Line? Didn't you have callers call in with questions on Tight Lines as well?
Yeah, that was live.
That couldn't have been easy.
No, that's right. Especially as you never know, who's going to call in.
And like it would be like relatively themed. It'd be like a carp specialist or like, and you'd be brought in as like,
that's right. Yeah,
and then it could be the question could be on anything.
Yeah, that's right. Well, talk of that. Two funny calls in Tight Lines. One, and I'll never forget it, and it's still. And again, if it happened to me now, you could deal with it better. But again, I was only covering for Keith, and like I say, you just nothing go wrong when Keith. A bit like if you looked after someone's dog running on holiday, you don't want it to run away or get run over. You just want it all to go smoothly. They come back, well, there you go. And what would happen was you got your screen and it would come up like Hassan carp advice. Yeah. So, you're talking to someone else and then you finish that call and you press the button and you say, right, time to go to Hassan now in Manchester. Want some advice on carp? Morning, Hassan. How can I help you? And off you go. Anyway, this one, it's a bloke's name and it said Bolognese, the old, which I took as, the Bolognese rod fishing style, the long rods, which I know a bit about. I'm happy to talk about that. And so I say, right, time to go. Rod now wants some advice on Bolognese float fishing, whatever. Hi. And it's a girl's voice. And she'd, actually, it's not Rob, it's Louise. I want a different type of advice. And okay,
No, Louise.
And I said, how can we help you? And... You'll laugh. It's funny now, but it wasn't then, especially as Robin was half asleep and not on the dump button. And she said, you're going to wet yourself. She said, is it true that if you stick a brown trout far enough up your arse, it'll reach your erogenous zones?
No, and that went out live?
That went out. And the thing is, Robin's not on the... There's like a 7-second delay, but Robin's not on the dump button.
Oh.
And of course, like, I'm thinking... beam me up, Scotty, get me out of here. But luckily, there's on the call thing on the screen, there's like Fred in Essex or whatever. So I cut her off. I just hit Fred and I just said, Fred, I don't know what you want to speak about, but as long as it's got nothing to do with brown trout or erogenous zones. And he couldn't have been a better caller because he's a real geezer. And he goes, leave it out, Nigel. It's too early in the morning for any of that malarkey. I want to ask you what bait you use carp fishing. Perfect. And I said, and off we went.
That is raw panic. I did a few lives for Angling Direct. I did one a week. We went out with an angler and we did a live on Facebook and whatever. There is little times in your life where you feel completely at the mercy of what is coming. On the feed sometimes you were just wishing you had to filter them so quickly in your head. because some of the comments were like, they're trying to make you say things through names and things like, and you had to be so like on it. It was exhausting to do, but that on live when you haven't got the support and you really can't do anything about it because it's done, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's been said. The sort of scrambling panic, it makes me feel uneasy, mate, thinking about it now.
There's another funny one where you always worry about like prank calls. And again, it's changed now. I think it's because it's possibly more expensive to call in, but you used to get people phoning like who hadn't been to bed, who were like, hanging, pissed or drugged up. They were always, you're really wary. But I did have one funny one. I'd caught a 3.9 roach, and it was a week before I was going to India, and I'd everything sort of packed and put away, and I didn't take my camera with me because I wasn't that optimistic of catching, and I'm not usually that worried about photos anyway.
Right.
And I'd had 3-pound roach before, so, it didn't really matter to me not taking my camera with me. So anyway, I have this 3.9. So the bailiff says, I'll go and get my camera. So he comes back, and it was a winter's day. It was around midday, but very, very dull. And he's got like 35. Again, this is slide days, not digital.
Right.
He's got good 35mm Canon. Looks like he knows what he's doing. He's got me all lined up, framed. It looks like it's going to be a nice picture. I'm holding this fish. And I nearly said to him, do you think you ought to put a bit of fill-in flash?
Yeah.
But I thought, no, don't tell him how to do it. He's going to think you're a dick. Just let him do it. It's his camera. He knows what he's doing. And I nearly said it. When I go back next time I see him, he goes, Nigel, I'm so sorry. I said, what? He said, I thought I had the flash on and I didn't. And the pictures, I could search you and you could see it and so cool, that's a lovely road. But, it's not the picture it should be. And anyway, I don't know how it came out, but we were talking about photography one day on Fisherman's Blues. Someone had phoned in for some advice or something. And I'd mentioned this story and said, fill-in flash, even on a nice summer's day, is often good, And I get a caller and he goes, call yourself a professional fisherman. You don't even take a camera with you. You don't know how to put a flash gun on. And he's really giving it to me. And I'm thinking, and then he sort of had a real rant. And before I had a chance to really say, he sort of hung up. I can't remember exactly how it went. But anyway, I carried on this show, get in the car afterwards. The minute I get in the car, my phone rings. He goes, gotcha.
Oh, my God, you haven't.
And it's one of my old schoolmates, Martin in Wenlock.
That is a belter from him.
We've been mates since we were 7, and we always wind each other out, and he's got me like a kipper. But I got him back a great one because he pretends to hate fishing. Like when we were kids, he'd come fishing with us just because he wanted to be out all night or be with us. But he no interest in fishing. Right. But, and so a couple of weeks later, I left it a bit, revenge is a dish best served cold. Left it a couple of weeks. And I said, we've got email here from a listener. In fact, it's from, oh God, she's going to kill me. I've forgotten his wife's name. I always do. She's got a very unusual name. But anyway, it's from Lillian. Sorry, Lillian. It's from Lillian Wenlock, who says, Dear Nigel, just want to say how much, because Martin's a really early riser and he's usually in town and he listens to Talk Sport, so he's listening to Fisherman's Blues. So just want to say that Martin never used to be interested in fishing, but since listening to your show, he loves it so much. And,
belter.
And I've bought him a thermos flask, everything that's not Wenlock. So I got him back. Of course, then you've got to be worried what he's going to come back with. But he hasn't
good,
got,
though.
he hasn't
I
got me
like
back
that.
yet.
And obviously, in more recent times, I've been on.
That's right.
Blues
I enjoyed listening to you with Tom.
Yeah. Tom's come into it a bit. Tom's mate, as a finding not a replacement, but somebody to take on the mantle and carry it on. That can't be an easy thing.
No, because it's a lot of stress. Because if you're a postman and you go on holiday, someone else will deliver your letters. It doesn't matter who. Whereas, with Fisherman's Blues, it was Keith with me as a replacement for years, and it makes me proud that there's only 3 people. You take Alan Brazil Sports Breakfast, you've got Ali McCoist, you've got all the jocks. There's so many people have done it. Whereas I think it's quite proud, and it's a nice thing for Tom, without sounding patronising. Only 3 people have been the Codfather. Yeah. Over 22 years, only 3 people presented that show. And, there aren't many people that could, because
he's epic, mate.
You need to be able to do the presenting and, of course, know about carp fishing, sea fishing, game fishing, match fishing. And so all the time, it was easy for me when Keith would say, these are my holiday dates, could you do them? Yeah. But then when Keith retired, he covered for me at first, but like I felt guilty asking because he's trying to retire. And then, of course, his wife was ill.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't ask him. So now I'm under real pressure. If I want to take a holiday, it's actually quite stressful. And you think of so many people who could possibly do it, but geographically it's wrong. And I had Tom on as a guest a couple of times. And, of course, the minute I had him on as a guest,
he's a brilliant
I
bloke.
thought, there's a bloke who could do it. And then I met him at Simon Scott's place on it was like a school trip. I always remember it. It was me, Tom, and Bev Clifford was there, and I said to her, "This is like a school trip, but interesting, like Simon showing us milking the fish, and it was fantastic, really interesting day." And of course, getting to know Tom there, I hadn't said anything to him, but getting to know him, I'm thinking, you could be the bloke, and I had him on a guest again, and then I invited him in to come into the studio and co-present with me. And again, I hate to say it sounds patronising, but I really like Tom and don't know him well, but I really like him. And
he's a brilliant bloke.
I was Tom's probably the same age as you, but to me, he's young. To me, you're young.
Yeah.
And from my point of view, I could just say to TalkSport, I'm retiring. It's your problem. You find the next person. One, I'm conscientious, and it's not like me. I wouldn't drop them in it. I'm conscientious. But secondly, I'd like someone else to have. I don't mean to sound patronising. I'd like someone else to have the opportunity, and it's lovely. Tom's taking it in both hands, and
mate, he's doing a great job.
We're lucky as well because I talk about producers going to sleep. The guy we've got now, Mark Randall, we've had for a long time, and he is brilliant. He's not a fisherman, but he's really well. You spoke to him when you were on as a guest.
He's top.
Mark's brilliant, and Mark loves the show. And we're lucky that the bosses at TalkSport, they say it is. I forgot what the word they used to me. It's something like it's part of the heritage of TalkSport. It's been there,
since day one.
And of course, it's famous for clips of the week.
Yeah.
And that's interesting when you were talking about doing stuff live. I'm sure there's a psychologist or a neuro expert who could explain it, but you must know it. It's even happening with us now. Like when you're doing something live to camera or live on radio, you're talking, but in your head you're having another conversation, aren't you?
You know, 100%, yeah.
Like I remember when I Tightline, when I used to do Fishery Focus, you're talking to camera, but you can see someone walking towards you, or you can see a plane come. You're thinking, I've got to finish this sentence before that plane will be too noisy. And it's amazing how your brain can work like that, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
And
you get so used to it though that you become sort of you two things at once, second nature.
Yeah,
There's
it
a lot of
does.
perception in there. For you, the future. I know that you're a member of. I think you said to me you've got free tickets at the moment, haven't you?
Carp. Yeah. I've got 3. I need to drop 1, maybe 2.
Do you?
Yeah.
No, keep them.
No,
all,
only.
no.
Yeah, I know you keep them because I want to concentrate on the new one. Yeah, I'm not a time band. I only mean like one night a week.
Is that what you do? One night a week?
Yeah. If I do 2 nights a week, on average in the winter, I'll probably go fishing twice a week, maybe 3 times if I nip out for a couple of hours with a fly rod.
Okay.
Like at the moment, say in the winter, I'd probably have 1 day on the river fishing for roach, 1 day on a lake fishing for perch, and then I'll probably nip out for a couple of hours somewhere in that week with a fly rod. Little nice. I'm really lucky. Near to me is a place called Felix Farm, which is a lovely, really friendly lake. It's got a fishing hut with a log burner. You go in and spend as much time drinking tea as fishing. Rob, the guy who runs it, is fantastic. It's really friendly atmosphere.
Yeah.
No stuck up people. It's just really nice. And we were saying the tug's the drug. I just love it when you get that. And again, it's so easy. No tackle. You can just your vest and your rod and off you go. So. That's me in the winter, roach, perch, a bit of pike fishing. But then come the spring, I'll start my carp fishing and I'll probably do, 1 night a week.
What's the carp fishing for now? You caught loads, caught carp everywhere, you caught big uns. What is the sort of factor that keeps you motivated with regards to carp fishing? Is it the look of the carp? Is it the heritage? Is it the type of fishing? Is it the methods? Is it, I don't know, is it the venue? What is it that keeps you sort of...
Well, it's all of that really. It's your car safe.
Okay.
Your car safe.
Yeah.
You can walk around the lake now and when you come back, your rods are still there.
Yeah.
And a nice looking lake and nice looking fish.
Right.
I'd rather catch a really nice sort of, scaly 20-pounder than a...
Do you like scales, yeah?
Yeah, I like scales.
Scales,
yeah,
you're not a bold, old, sort of Elstowy, sort of nothing on it, leathery looking thing.
Funny enough, when you talk about leathers, I don't know if it's still in there, but on Church Lake, I remember doing some filming with Gary years ago, and he had, I think it was about £39 leather. And I've never had a big leather, and that is one thing I would like to catch, a big leather. Yeah, I really
rare, mate, but they're good.
No,
they're crazy looking things.
I remember
they?
years ago fishing, I think it was Homersfield, years ago, when I really didn't know much what I was doing, and I went up there. I don't know if it was advertised in
Martin's place.
One of the magazines or something. And I know I did a night, and this would have been in the 1980s, and I'd like a £19.5 leather. I wasn't even disappointed it wasn't 20. It was a proper leather.
Mega fish.
It was beautiful, yeah.
Yeah. But other than that, normally scales you're going for.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love commons as well, but I do like nice sort of, linear-y, Nice. And this lake I've joined has got them, and it's also got the other thing. I think I've caught them when I've been carp fishing, but I've never actually tench fishing at a double figure tench. I've had big uns that I've put back carp fishing without weighing them in the night that I've regretted afterwards. But this one, the new one I've just joined, has got some nice tench in as well. So
nice.
The spring I will fish for tench.
That is nice. And in terms of your aspirations, I mean, we talked a bit about travel and places you've been in. We've only really scratched the surface because you fish for loads of different species everywhere. I think for me, working at Angling Direct with Oliver Harper, you spent a lot of time with his dad, Masheer, fishing in India, and you talked a little bit about that, but you've had some incredible results, Masheer-wise, out there. They are a carp, aren't they? They're cyprinid, are they?
Yeah, they are. What it looks like a huge sort of cross between a carp and a barbel. I mean, they are fantastic. The scales are humongous, and the Indians used to use them as playing cards or placemats. They're just... Oh, they're brilliant fish.
I'll never forget seeing John Wilson in that coracle. Remember that episode of Go Fishing? Yeah. And I think that was like, geez, those fish are incredible. Like, they are like carp, but like some exotic carp. But you've been there, caught them, sort of had it at its best, haven't you, with regards to fishing out there?
Yeah.
Was that? I know you've done a lot, and it's hard to say this, and it's a horrible question, really, to put somebody in. But in terms of all your adventures, all your travelling, all your fishing, carp fishing involved in it, Florida, everything. Is that the pinnacle, adventure-wise, trip-wise?
Yeah. I'm sad to say it because it's over. The river's ruined now. The fish are virtually extinct. It's really sad, but some of the best fishing I've ever done. The best fishing I've ever done. I've had great adventures, been some fantastic places, but sadly, I can't imagine finding anything that can match that. It's just, you're holding the rod, which is great. You're swimming to a rock to get to a swim. There's elephants coming down to drink. There's panthers roaring at night. You got crocodiles. You're in the most beautiful. I'll tell you one thing I used to love about it. You're in a valley, a magnificent, fast-flowing river. And what I used to love is you'd swim out to a rock and you'd sit on that rock and you'd look around you and you think, I could have been here 1,000 years ago and it'd be exactly the same. All right, this rock's a little bit smoother from the river running over it, but nothing has changed. And there aren't many places you can go in the world and say that, are there?
No, definitely. What's the biggest you had? What's the biggest Masheer you had?
Biggest one I had was 88.
Oh, my.
I had lots of, 50s, 60s, 70s. And the nice thing was I worked up, it's quite nice. And funny enough, I don't know if, not many fish you think, chub are a fish I often think. I don't know if you've ever done it. You catch a chub and you think that's on the way down. Like some fish are growing and getting bigger, but you sometimes catch a fish that you think is on
waning.
And funny enough, because like over the years, there was only you could probably count on one hand how many 100-pound Masheer. I mean, Steve Harper, as you know, the first year caught 104-pounder, fish for a lifetime. But you could probably count on one hand since that how many 100-pounders got caught. And of course, you're hoping for an 80 or a 90. Don't get me wrong, you're delighted with a 40. We used to catch anything over 20 pound. We used to count as a really good one. But when I had my 88, although I wasn't disappointed, 8's my lucky number. I used to play 8 at rugby, and so 88's a nice number. But I felt that fish was on. It didn't fight like it, but it just looked like it was on the way down. I suspect that could have been a lot bigger at one stage. But I mean, I wasn't complaining. It was fun. And it's funny because I remember I was on one side of the river. We'd gone in the coracle out to a rock very close to the bank, and I only sort of little underarm drop. And when I hooked it, I could tell it was a good fish, but I didn't think it was that big because you sometimes they sell you a dummy, you think you've got it under control, and it's just a bit like a carp just plodding round under the rod top, and I'm sat on this rock just thinking, I'm going to land this here, and then all of a sudden, it gets the current, jump in the coracle, and actually landed it on the other side of the river.
Jeez,
it was beautiful fish.
But just the environment, those places, like you're not going like to places that are the trodden path, mate. You're out in the middle of nowhere.
Exactly. And the sunrises, the sunsets were beautiful. I love everything about India. It used to be fantastic. Just sleeping in a tent, and you've got the monkeys trying to steal your stuff out the tent. There's vultures. It's just fantastic.
I don't like the thought of crocodiles, mate. I don't like that. Yeah, that's not a bit of me.
I remember Dave Plummer and Steve Glassett having me round the waist once when I hooked a big fish down on an area we called Croc Rock. And I thought I was going to get spooled, and I went to jump in, and they were like hanging on to me, stopping me jumping in.
Straight into Croc World.
Yeah. And funny enough, like pictures and emotion, I wish I had a picture, because Steve came with us a few times, and Steve had a 70. And I've got a picture of us sitting in the river, the two of us. We're probably only in our 30s, possibly 40 years old, but, it's a long time ago. But the two of us sat there as grown men, age is irrelevant, but we're adults, and we're sat in that river holding a 70. And I've got that photo. Ooh. And I would do anything to have a photo of us as 5-year-olds in Bushy Park, where we used to catch roach that were probably this big. And wouldn't it be great to have a picture of the two of you as 5-year-olds, a roach like that, and your fishing journey?
That's mad, isn't it?
And it is brilliant how fishing takes you on a journey, isn't it?
What about other journeys for you? Foreign adventures, trips? Is there any species, anything that sort of? We've talked the carp side. We got tickets of a nice place, and you want to crack on with that. You've got your roach fishing, your river fishing, your pike fishing, your fly fishing. Further afield, any trips on?
I've got about 3 French trips booked this year and next year, which I'm looking forward to. But I've got one thing I've always wanted to do, and again, for the wildlife as much as the fishing, but, everyone wants to go to Alaska to see the bears.
Yeah.
So September, I'm booked for a week's fishing in Alaska. And, I've caught salmon in America, Canada, Ireland, in the UK. I haven't caught one from the Y on a fly yet. That's on my wish list. But, just to spend a week sleeping in a log cabin next to a river, catching salmon, bears, and I'm hoping that I might also, I don't need to catch salmon every day for a week. I hope I can catch some grayling or some, some other trout. Yeah. But, I'm really, really looking forward to that.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah, that's a great adventure, isn't it? But I mean, although it's wilderness, it's not pioneering, you're going to have a guide and what have you, but
it's different, isn't it? I think now as well, the internet is so
there's like when I went to Suriname, I loved it there. That was really rugged. That was close to it, like jungle and snakes, and you could drown, you could get, all sorts of things.
You've got to be on the edge,
yeah. All sorts of things could go wrong there. But again, lots of people are going there now, and it's still not quite. I don't think there's many places left.
Where do you think there is? Do you think there's anywhere?
Well, luckily, I'm probably at that age now where I don't mind staying in a cabin with a bed at night. I mean, I still love being in a bivvy, but I remember when I was in Suriname, that Gore-Tex bivvy bag, I slept out in the open in that, and I got done by, I don't know, fire ants or something, and you actually wanted to cry. You're bleeding from head to toe almost, and you're trying not to scratch yourself, and you can't go, Mum, there's no hospital or anything. It's
that's the thing. It's the sort of isolation to it all. If something does happen, it is you are properly out there. I'm trying to think where is red. I often thought, and this is obviously part of my father's side heritage, is Afghanistan out that way, which has always been
I used to think that because huge barbel in Iran,
massive barbel,
and I did used to think that, but I don't think that's going to. And again, you're not going to go to Russia now.
No,
I think the wild thing I'd like to do, not ultra wild, but it's so easy now to book a commercial in France because it's great. They've But I think French rivers and other rivers around the world have still got a lot, to
potentially offer, aren't they?
Yeah.
I like that.
You never know; there might even be carp in Alaska.
Hey, if there are, I'm hoping you find them, mate, and bring some shots back.
If there are, I will, but I don't think there are. I think because it's too sea fed. But
you never know. You never know. I've thoroughly enjoyed this podcast, Nigel. It's been brilliant to sit down and chat to you. As I said, you had a massive influence and bearing on me as an angler coming up, watching tight lines and through your work. But I've enjoyed how different, versatile this podcast has been in terms of your angling, mate. It's been something out of the norm, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm sure the viewers and listeners have. Before I let you go, I've got 10 quick-fire questions, mate, you've got to answer. All right?
You only get 3 on Fisherman's Blues. We let you off lightly. 10.
Briefed. I don't know if you've got 10. I've said that. It might be 8. I might have cut you shy, but you've not been briefed on these, so let's see how you go.
Hit me with them. 1
species, 1 method, 1 venue. They don't have to be linked.
That is a killer.
That's a tough start, mate.
That is... Do you know, it's funny because I ask people questions like this on Fisherman's Blues and I never know...
hard.
That is really hard. I mean, 1 venue would just have to be a river.
Yeah.
Can I get away saying a river for a venue?
Of course you can.
1 species, if they still existed, I'd say Masheer from the Calvary River in India. That would be easy. But 1 species is so difficult. Do I really have to answer it?
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you do. 1 species. That is tough.
It's a killer. Might be roach.
Yeah, big roach. You can't.
Might be roach. Float fishing with a centre pin for roach on a river.
Winner. Well done. 3 words to describe yourself. Ooh.
Oh, that's horrible. I've never even thought of that.
Horrible. Go on.
Likes a laugh.
Yeah.
Tries hard. Oh, dear.
Anti-authority.
No, I'll take that. Yeah. Anti-abusive authority.
No,
there you go.
I like that.
Yeah, I'll settle for that.
What's your idea of carp fishing hell?
A lake full of anglers all casting into each other's swims and no etiquette.
Nice. 3 celebrities you'd take fishing. They can be past or present.
So not ones I've been lucky enough to go fishing with.
No.
Yeah, okay. So that's a really good question, isn't it? Blimey, you should have given me this advance. This will be one where I
can edit out these pauses.
I'm going to be on the M25 in the traffic jam going home, thinking of all the answers I should have come up with. But celebrities. That's a really hard one because I haven't really got any. Like, one of my heroes growing up was Pat Jennings, because at school I played in goal at football.
Did you?
Pat Jennings was like my hero then. And it's funny because he used to catch the ball he had massive hands. He used to catch the ball one-handed from corners. And when I played rugby in a line-out, if you ever caught the ball with one hand, as I caught it, as it stuck in my head, I'd say Pat Jennings. Yeah, I remember last time I did it, I think I just said Pat Jennings and someone got my hand there and dislocated my shoulder.
Oh, nice.
But, Pat Jennings. Christ.
You can have Pat Jennings.
No, because I don't really know him, and he's not a fisherman, although he might be being Irish, although he's northern.
It don't have to be a fisherman here. There could be a non-angler that you just want to take out for a day's fishing.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fine.
It's funny. I'll tell you somebody who, when I see him on television or on podcasts talking about his mental health, I always think that Tyson Fury would love to go fishing.
Yeah?
I mean, I remember seeing him once talking to a kid fishing on the river, and I really think that he would love a day's fishing, and especially some of the types that I've took him to a river. So, yeah, I'll take Tyson Fury because I think, it's not me hero worshipping Tyson Fury. I just think he would really, really enjoy it.
Also, Andy, if you get into a bit of trouble with the old Garde de Pêche.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, that is true.
Just start swinging, mate.
Yeah. Off you go. And funny enough, when you were saying earlier celebrities, I was lucky enough to meet him a few times and interview him as a young journalist. But, in my lifetime, probably, it's funny because when you use the word celebrity, I was talking to a mate of mine who I started my career with, Dave Dyson. I started as a young reporter. He was a photographer at an agency years ago. And we used to work like paparazzi, if you like, at Heathrow. But we had airside passes. So we got, we'd interview footballers, actors, actresses, politicians.
No way.
Yeah, it was brilliant. But we were talking maybe 10 years ago, and we'd been bemoaning all these, Big Brother types. And we're saying in those days, I used to have to go down the pub after work and not tell my mates what I'd done that day because you could, like you've interviewed Muhammad Ali, Raquel Welch, Pele.
You interviewed Muhammad
Pele,
Ali?
yeah, Pele.
Wow, mate.
And you didn't mention it to your mates down the pub because it sounds like you're Billy Big Bollocks, But in those days, I was talking to Dyson not long ago, and we're saying in those days the word celebrity didn't exist.
Yeah.
You were a footballer, you were a film star, you were an actor. But I suppose in my lifetime, the biggest person really would be Ali. So I reckon he'd be great fun fishing, wouldn't he?
Mate, that'd be unreal. Mohammed Pele as well.
Yeah.
Maradona?
No, I'd finished all that by then. Finished all that by then.
It's a different podcast we need to go on here. Gosh, that's unbelievable.
So I've got, if I'd got Tyson Fury and Muhammad Ali.
Sport heavy, I like this.
I ought to have.
Female?
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking, shouldn't I, without getting in too much trouble? Who would I have? I don't know if when you're a kid, you fancy Raquel Welch and that, but I don't think I've got a real, crush. Who could I take? You suggest someone.
I'll take Megan Fox with me, but that's slightly different, mate. I don't think that's very selfish reasons. I'm not sure she likes fishing.
No, exactly. Michelle Pfeiffer's nice, isn't she?
Yeah, you take that. Good mix.
Yeah, let her come.
Mix.
Yeah, we'll let her come.
Nice mix.
You'll get me in trouble at home.
I'll edit this out if it gets too much trouble, don't worry. Biggest angling influence?
Blimey. Jack Hilton and Ivan Marks.
Oh, Ivan Marks, yeah.
Yeah, when we were kids, when we were carp fishing, you were Jack Hilton, and when you were like sitting there watching your swing tip, you were Ivan Marks.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, good 2 picks. Favourite history carp that you wish you caught?
Clarissa. You're not going to catch her from the zoo. No, seriously, most people say the Black Mirror, but the Black Mirror, I knew Jason when he caught it. And it's funny because things have changed now, like Terry Hearn famously keeps his album with all his target fish that he wants to catch. Whereas I'm not like that. If someone catches a carp, it didn't really interest me. I want to catch one that you don't know about, sort of thing. And so I remember when Jason caught that, no interest to me to go and try and catch that. And I was a bit like that with the Royal 40 as well. But having said that, I think it would be the Royal 40 just because my manner, if you like, and, seen it. And
I love that.
I love Richie, and it was great that he caught it,
Definitely so. Good answer. Your proudest moment to date? Ooh. You've had a lot of mega moments.
Are we talking life or fishing?
Well, we're going life here, mate.
Life. Having 4 brilliant grandchildren.
Yeah, good answer again. Best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
I'll give you 2 answers. Fishing wise, I was playing a giant Siamese carp, and there was a crowd of probably about 50 screaming Thai telling me it was going to be a world record, and somebody actually had a form to fill in a world record, and like everyone's screaming and shouting, and I'm playing it forever. It was really fighting hard. And Joe, when I remember Terry Eustace once when we took him sturgeon fishing, he said, I'm getting plenty of advice and none of it any fucking good. And Joe just whispered in my ear and he said, no prizes for losing it, mate. Take your time.
Yeah,
that's the best fishing advice I've had. And my dad gave me a very good bit of advice when I was a young journalist. And you think you love everyone at your work and you go out drinking and socialising with them and what have you. And I remember getting offered a good job on a local paper, a very good paper. And you want that job. You don't mind leaving your job, but you think of all your friends and that.
Yeah.
And my dad said to me, Nigel, he said, the ones that your true friends will remain friends. The others are ships that pass in the night. And I mentioned that guy Dyson. We're still mates now over 40 years later, and that was good advice.
Sound. Final question.
Right.
A night out on the bank or a night in with the missus, mate? What are you taking?
She'd let me go out on the bank.
There you go. Good answer. Nigel, by the way, you've been an absolute star. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your stories. Thank you guys for watching and listening. I'll be back soon with another Nash Off the Hook podcast. Until then, Nigel, you're a gent. Thank you very much, mate.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.